3, 2, 1.
Woo! Mark it.
Welcome to the first ever OutZide podcast. My name is Bam Lionheart. I will be moderating today's very special podcast. We are starting off day one at OutZide the Box, and today we have assembled this panel for our first ever podcast at the OutZide HQ. We have gathered today in the spirit of the mission of OutZide the Box. The mission of OutZide the Box is to gather great minds together and share experiences, beliefs, and ultimately your wisdom with each other and everyone else who is here watching and listening from home. Please be prepared to stretch your minds, all of us, up here on the panel, and for all of you listening at home. We're doing this to foster the evolution of athletic performance training, something that I know each and every one of us on this panel cares deeply about. Gentlemen, now I will introduce yourself, please. Invite you to introduce yourself. We're going to start right to my right with Uncle Weck.
Which camera is the camera? Or is this all cameras? Right there? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm David Weck. I invented the Bosu ball in 1999. I've been working in movement ever since. Have some things to share, and I am just super grateful to be at OutZide amongst these gentlemen. This man, just met him, and I'm so happy. I haven't met Brian yet, and I'm happy. So anyway, that's me.
My name is Tony Holler. I'm just a high school track coach. I taught chemistry for 38 years, been retired for 6. This is my 44th season as a track coach, and I always introduce myself as a coach's son. My dad was 23 when I was born, and he was a head basketball coach. He went on to coach 47 years at the high school and college level, 44 as a head coach. So he didn't just dabble in coaching. It was his life. In the Midwest, if you're a head basketball coach, you are the most recognizable person in town. And that's both good and bad. And that's what I grew up with, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
I'm Beau, Chavez, co-owner and director of education for OutZide. Also helped create the treads back behind us, the protocols that go along with it. Born and raised in northern New Mexico. So to Tony's point is, grew up in a small hometown where athletics was everything and anything, and it's what you did growing up. One of few that didn't have to work in the coal mine. Went to college, grew up in the athletic performance world. In college, went off to Alaska, started a company up in Alaska called Acceleration Alaska, and went back home to New Mexico to work with small hometown kids and create and develop the protocols with high-performance treadmills in hopes that kids like me had the opportunity to go on and do greater and better things, which is why we're here now. It's all about the community and the people that we grow up with and to give back. And so that's who I am. And I was just talking with Colin, not to make a long story, make it short here, is this. There's few things that define a career, and there's certain aspects of your career that you remember, and I can promise you right now, sitting up here with David Weck, Tony Holler, and Brian Kula is definitely going to be something that I'll remember the rest of my life, and I'm honored to be on this panel and with you three and with Bam. So that's who I am, and God's bless to you all, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. My name is Brian Kula, owner of Kula Sports Performance, and similar to Tony, I grew up in a gym, on a field, and on a track with my dad. The name Kula Sports Performance was not a self-promoting name choice. It was a legacy to my grandfather and my dad, who were both coaches. I spent the first 27 years of my career as a high school track, football. I'll call myself a performance coach. I was teaching 8 sections of weight training all those years, kind of formulating my thoughts and ideas of how to always try to maximize the potential of the athletes that I was working with, which then kind of through the COVID year spun me into a business opportunity. And we took that and basically my biggest background as a track and field athlete was to take track and field principles of speed development and see how I could apply those to different sports. And that's what we've been doing for the last 5 years. I had the opportunity to work with some very elite athletes. So that's a challenging environment to really it'll help you kind of sharpen the pencil on what you're doing training wise. And again, I'm humbled to be here. Probably meeting the OutZide guys and having worked with Tony and watching David's stuff and over the years has really been inspirational. And for me, I don't ever see myself as like, you should be on the panel. But really honored and thanks for having me.
In the state of sports performance right now, it's very common for different silos or groups to form all around the country, around the world. And these are groups of people in geographic areas, but also thought people, different philosophies that start to develop. Outside the Box is very special because we take these different silos and these different groups, put them in the same room, put them on a panel, and we get to discuss what's happening and share and learn from each other. So the first question that I have for each one of you gentlemen is, I want to know, in the last 1 to 2 years, what is something that you have learned from somebody else or something that you've seen that has really inspired you and dramatically transformed the way that you train and coach athletes?
I'll start. And it's not because I'm sitting on this panel here, but the thing that I think about anytime I see somebody sprinting is I think spinal engine. I think head over foot. And that all comes from this guy who showed up at a Feed the Cats seminar in Orange County. And he pulled a hamstring demonstrating. I'll never forget that.
I was demonstrating wrong.
Yeah, so the spinal engine, I think, is really important. And I think it's so clear to me now why I think that just lifting, especially for football players, is so terrible for their movement patterns. Because when you lift, you brace your spine, and you can lock up your spine. And I think we've all seen kids come out, the muscle-bound kids that look good in a mirror, and you're like, he's going to get hurt in the first 3 days. And they do, because their spine is locked down, and being able to move is so important, and to move correctly. And so that's kind of my thing.
Yeah. I'll follow up. I would say that in the past year and a half, the most exciting thing that has happened to me was becoming aware of Tony. And what I appreciate about Tony is the fact that he has been devoted to craft without climbing the ladder as the first objective, right? So that right there that makes you special, because most people, especially the younger crowd, right? You're going after the ring, you want the brass ring, and so what am I going to post, what am I going to say, who am I going to talk to so that I'm perceived as the guy who's presenting the ring? But I have cared about sports performance more than anything probably in my life, because I'm athletically inadequate, so it gives me high motivation to figure out how to beat the better man. And Tony's theories and practices, this concept of never burn the steak. This entire hour is devoted to 6 seconds of stimulus that's going to make you faster, right? And that takes tremendous confidence, because a lack of confidence, the way you solve that is you pile more on, right? Pile more on. And the athletes that I've worked with, several of them, the question that I keep getting in the beginning is, are we doing enough? Are we doing enough? Are we doing enough? I don't know. Is the ball going further? Yeah. You tell me. Are we doing enough? I don't know. So I think the time has come where Tony's methodology and years of experience, it's just going to become known across the board. And I think that's the justifiable end point, which is a new beginning point for the entire industry. Because we've got a bunch of children in the industry, me included, a bunch of bickering, a bunch of bullshit, a bunch of blah, blah, blah. And we're going to break down the walls now, and we're going to use objective, empirical measure, right? And then we're going to find a better balance of competition and cooperation, right? It's only healthy when you're competitive and cooperative, right? And so best idea wins has to be the model moving forward. Because all this legacy shit, not that legacy, but the legacy shit of, oh, well, my master taught me this and therefore that, and science is now a new religion that we will pray to. There's a lot of athletes with non-contact injuries, okay? And I have theories about why these non-contact injuries have become epidemic, okay? And we're talking about lives where the dreams have been crushed. And I'm sensitive to it because in the industry, as the inventor of the Bosu ball, I'm like the piñata, okay? If you want to throw a stone, who do you want to hit? It's me, okay? And I don't care about that as much as I care about the best information reaching the people so that people put into practice principles that are true and invariantly correct. And faster is faster. You want the ultimate science? Click, click. That's how I feel. And so I'm just thrilled that Tony's my new friend. I met him up at that conference that he was putting on. We went out to dinner, and oh man, it was a late night. I invited him to drive down to San Diego with me. He had a flight in the morning. He couldn't do it. So anyway, that's hats off to Tony Holler. That's what I have to say.
And just to add one thing, like we're probably polar opposites politically, and we're still friends, which I think is a powerful thing, that we don't have to agree with everything. David can be wrong on everything political, and I still love his Final Engine stuff.
I'd say for me, and it's maybe ironic that we're sitting here at Uberzati, but meeting Tim and Beau a couple years ago really kind of changed the way that I was looking at some of the way we were doing things and integrating the treadmill into what we were doing. I was never a treadmill guy. I knew about some treadmill stuff. I remember the acceleration program up in
I cut my teeth, man.
up in Greeley, almost 30 years ago, and kind of looking at it, thinking, oh, there's some interesting stuff there, but it's you're still just running on a treadmill, and so. For us, it really was, how can we use that as a tool to enhance the things that we're already doing in ground interaction, and some of the things that I've experienced with it over the last, 6 months that we've had them in our facility has been unreal. And tomorrow I'll talk about some of the way that we've integrated it, but that's been a major shift for us in how we're programming and how I'm programming for some of the professional athletes that I work with, and. I'm kind of a growth mindset guy. I'm always looking for stuff, watching Bam's stuff, watching David's stuff. Tony and I formulated a relationship 5 years ago that, probably both changed some things, but also affirmed some things that I had been doing. And so, meeting these guys and being able to integrate that equipment into what we were doing was totally game changing for me. So, I feel like I change stuff all the time. I think as good coaches, you're always kind of questioning what you're doing. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've had, a lot of success, but I think, every couple months I'm like, man, should I be doing that anymore? What else can I offer up? So not getting locked into like, hey, this is my system. This is what I do, and getting outside the box and listening to some other people that might have more wisdom than you do has been just a total blessing in my career.
I think what people have to understand right now is when everybody is like, the past year, 2 years, I understand the question, but what I think we need to really focus on is, 30 years. I'm almost at 30 years. Tony, 30 plus years, right?
44.
44 years. David?
I started in '92 as a personal trainer to finance my acting career for 7 years. Then I invent the Bosu ball. And I say, this opportunity is way too good. Call my agent, I'm done.
So, so we're talking basically 120 years plus of, I guess you want to call it knowledge, right?
Something like that.
You could say 1 year.
Experience.
What have I learned in the last year is, I'm the, I hate the term I'm the treadmill guy, but technically I am the treadmill guy because that's what I've been doing for 30 plus years. But then you meet somebody like Bam, and he's like, no, you need to see it this way. Look from the back and see what's going on from a spiral. You know, David is head over toe. Tony, feed the cats. Don't burn that steak. Kula, track. And this is what we do in the track world. And this is how I'm training certain people. I'm training them like a track athlete, but they're not a track athlete. At the end of the day, it's all about speed. But what I think people have to understand is you take all that knowledge, and we can all be up here and say, okay, I do it this way. And I'm like, no, I'm the treadmill guy. I'm going to stay the treadmill guy. I'm going to be the feed the cats guy. I'm the Bosu ball guy. I'm the Weck guy, right? I'm the, primal movement guy. But at the end of the day, I think what everybody has to understand is when you can combine all that knowledge, all the movement, all the speed, and combine it together, and once again be outside the box in the thinking, like you said. You may not agree with him. I may not agree with you. You may not agree with me. You weren't a treadmill guy until you met me a year ago, and you combine all that knowledge together and come up not necessarily with a system, but be able to say, hey, I'm going to do Kula, and we're going to do Kula Z. I'm going to do feed the cats, but I'm going to add it into possibly what we do on the treadmill. I'm going to take BAM, add in head over foot or whatever the Weck method is, and combine it together. If you're sitting out there and you're new into the industry, and I was just talking to Tony's son, another, I think, thing we have to understand is, and on this maybe we're getting, is what we have been doing, each of us, over the past 30 years, is where the industry is now going.
Yeah.
And I talked to your son and I said, just think how cool this is in 30 years, right? You may be looking back and thinking, holy shit, right? 30 years ago, there was the first annual, right, OutZide podcast, and these guys were talking about how they developed speed and what speed is now and the way it is. And now it's the norm, where now it may be a little bit different, and we're getting blowback on what BAM's doing. You're getting blowback on what Kula's doing. You're getting blowback on what Holler's doing, right? Weck, he's doing whatever he's doing, right? The treadmill guy, that's not, running on the treadmill is just not the same. But I think now when you bring people together like this panel or the people that are in this audience, I think we're onto something, and we've been doing it for so long that now it's quote unquote maybe possibly the norm. I don't think it's the norm. It's just what it's been, for the past, I don't know, 100 years, you can call it that, right?
Change is threatening, change is scary. And the best example in sports that I have for change that was not recognized, ridiculed, rejected, was the Fosbury flop in the high jump. Okay, 1968, Mexico City. This guy, he's all gangly, he's far from the best athlete in the field. He sets the Olympic record and wins the gold, doing something we've never seen before. And biomechanically, his center of mass doesn't need to clear the bar, but his body does. Magic. 4 years later, 1972, gold medal. It's not as high a jump, and the guy's doing a old scissor, Western, whatever, I don't care. It's not as good biomechanically. 8 years for Fosbury to be accepted because there is not a biomechanically better way to do that competition. And in hindsight, looking back on that as a biomechanist, and you're going to say that you ridiculed it and rejected it? Well, that's a shame on you.
How many Olympians do it, the Western roll, these days?
Exactly zero. Exactly zero, right?
Zero.
Yeah, I mean, that's for the person who's like, I'm 85 and I'm going to do the high jump. All right, well, just roll over, right? So big change, big change is coming. And as far as I'm concerned, locomotion is the bridge to all things. Upright bipedal locomotion makes the human being the most efficient terrestrial animal on this planet.
Well, from a primal standpoint, you go, BAM, to me, what's more primal than anything, right? We crawl, we stand up, we walk, right? But at the end of the day, if to survive as human beings, we had to sprint. Not long distances.
Well,
right? We can get into that, right?
Well,
but not long distance. I mean, there were certain times we had to run long distances, but at the end of the day, if we needed to survive, to eat, to feed our family, to actually just survive, what did we have to do? We had to sprint.
I get a lot of blowback because, especially in football, and I'll talk about this tomorrow, they say, well, it's all acceleration. Max speed's not important.
Bullshit.
And then they say, football is like this. Nobody runs in a straight line, so it's not important. So what do? They lift a ton and condition a lot, and they do a couple 5s or 10s. And what I say is the speed is the tide that lifts all boats, Les Spellman says speed is global. We will talk about Brian Kula's female golfers tomorrow in my presentation. And what happens is when we train the extreme, we train the range. And the most extreme movement in the human experience is sprinting in a straight line, spiked up with the wind and getting timed. By the way, if you're not getting timed, you're probably running. You're not sprinting. Plus, when you get timed, you are gamifying exercise, which makes it fun for kids. And we're really good at what we like, and we're obsessed with what we love. So making it fun for kids is really important. But sprinting in a straight line as fast as you can still is rejected by maybe 75% of
I'd say more than
the
that.
people in our business.
I'd say 90%.
And I'm all about that. We've got to learn how to sprint faster in a straight line. And we get better at everything else when we do.
Yeah.
But so go back to spring, right? We can talk about the lifting thing, right? Because everybody likes to get under the bar. I like getting under the bar, right? But trying to get somebody to understand is if you can sprint faster, you will get stronger,
It's global.
right? But the mindset is we have to get stronger first to sprint faster. Whereas if you can get faster sprinting, and we've seen it, I think we've all seen it, is when you get under the bar, if that's what you're going to do, because at the end of the day, I think that's what coaches are going to do, right? But if you can teach them to sprint, like you said, faster and harder, whatever that may be, right? It's the most primal thing we can do. But then when you get them into the racks, which is what they're going to do, they will be stronger.
I agree.
But I don't think you can be. I don't think you can lift heavy and then get faster. To an extent, you can, right? But I think if you teach people to run with speed, they will get stronger in the racks.
Beau is already kind of going in this direction, so I just want to put a nice little structure around this. We've got 2 truth statements, and I want you to pick one that you agree with and then explain why. These 2 truth statements are getting stronger will make you faster, or getting stronger will make you stronger. Those 2 truth statements, which one do you agree with more and why?
I want to hear you.
So
This is served up on a platter for you, right?
Yeah, no.
Kula, you got my drift on this.
Yeah, I do.
Because we're trying to get faster, and a lot of times people say we need to get under the bar to make that happen. So am I getting faster and stronger? How are we doing this?
I mean, I think what I've known to be true is if you get faster, you will get stronger. There's a neural response that'll help your strength by sprinting. Can you get faster by getting stronger? The answer is yes. Now, depending on the level of development,
Right.
if you're a young athlete, you don't have strength levels. Some of that development will inherently make you faster. I remember Boyd Epley back in the day at Nebraska had a old school experiment where he took football players and all they did was lift weights and they all got faster in the 40. And so there is some truth behind strength. That's the lowest hanging fruit. Yes. And I think it's a little bit sometimes disingenuous or unfair to say that, coaches just lift. They just lift. Well, it's easier. Most people know the weight room. It's a lot easier to put somebody under a bar, develop a strength level, and then they're going to see some residual benefit from that. I think at the highest level, or to take it to a level of efficiency and really maximize output, then that takes a lot more work, right? We know that to be true of, teaching somebody how to ground strike properly, hit good positions. I mean, I spent 10 minutes with Weck over there and my mind was blown just of like all the things that he's thinking about of how to properly interact with the ground. And so that's not easy for a young coach to, go, okay, well, I'm going to start from here and teach a kid how to properly interact with the ground. But I think that strength levels they're always going to be a part of it. But there's also other paths to strength development, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily under a bar, right? There's strength development in plyometrics and isometrics and things like that where you don't necessarily have to load the spine to get to that end game of some strength development. So I think the answer is there's some truth in the middle of both of those things. Yeah. But if I had to pick one or the other, I would certainly err towards the side of, running fast can help strength levels, not necessarily the other way around.
And the good thing is that a lot of people attack me for being sprint only, and I'm not. But sprint needs to be the priority. But as Tony Villani has said, who's Mr. Game Speed, he's a terrific guy, is that just because it's the priority does not mean it's the majority. You cannot sprint train for 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. I mean, there are football teams all over Texas doing the atomic speed workout, which is a great hook because it's a 15-minute workout where you do 60 seconds of work and you feel better after the workout than you felt before. So it potentiates everything you do afterwards. So kids are ready to play football. And so when I say a football coach needs to make sprinting the priority, the return on investment is crazy. It's like 2% of your coaching that leads to incredible advantages. So that whole thing about, and the other thing I was going to mention too, I think that the phenoms of the sprint world were phenoms before they ever met their first good coach.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Okay.
Genetic limitation, right? What do
They
say?
were phenoms.
They say-
Now, their first good coach maybe helped them.
I say there's just some kids or some athletes that just wake up and eat their bowl of genetics.
Bo Jackson.
And
Exactly.
and
Are
the
you going to
point
make Bo
is,
Jackson faster? Are you going to make
Well, the answer
Usain
is
Bolt
yes.
faster?
The answer is yes, but
You may make him slower.
No, I ain't gonna make him slower. Someone will. Please, I'm not gonna make anyone
Not you.
slower.
Not you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I'm saying, I know coaches that could make
No,
him
no,
slower.
absolutely.
Not
You're
you.
right about that.
Not you.
You're
Not
right
you,
about
Weck.
that.
No.
You're right
No,
about
I'm
that.
all about you. No,
You're absolutely right.
but that's a good point.
Well, it's also too, if you think about it, it's a loaded question of strength. Define strength.
Yeah, there
What
you
is-
go.
What is strength? There's
That's a good
many
one.
different kinds of strength.
What's agility?
And so, I don't know that you can ask that question in just one, strength. Well, let's define what that is. And so,
I think you nailed it on the head, though, in terms of the lowest hanging fruit is get stronger, okay? And all things equal, stronger is better, okay? And then you're a fool, you don't think, why are boys better than girls at sprinting? Because they're stronger, their tissues are stronger, everything about them stronger, and so they're faster. And when you're 14 versus you're 18, I mean, your 40 went from a 5'2" to a 4'6", and all you did was lift weights, right? So when you get to the next threshold, where it's not the small little fishbowl, but now you're getting into the lakes and the oceans, well, now the correct strength is everything. And if you are getting stronger in a manner that compromises your speed, you better have a good reason.
Say that again. I think that's
I
very
say-
important. That's
what-
I think that's key to what we're talking about.
Yes,
Say what you just said.
Well, if you're getting stronger at the expense of getting faster, well, then have a good reason. You're a power lifter and you want to lift 3,000 pounds.
Right.
Okay, you don't care how long it takes you to get to the door. It doesn't matter. I want to lift weights. You got a reason. It's justifiable. But if you're getting stronger and you're getting slower and you want to play sports, you're wrong. You're just wrong, and that's not the correct strength.
And that's why you need to time sprints. Because when you time stuff, you learn stuff. Too many people do all their stuff,
Yeah.
and you say, are they getting faster? And they say, well, I think so.
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah.
And they probably aren't. I mean, plus when you time sprints, kids actually learn to sprint faster because they try to run faster than they've ever run.
Don't get in a slap fight with your friend because he's going to hit you and then you're going to hit a little harder and then it's a full-fledged fight because neither one of you guys likes being embarrassed by getting slapped by your buddy, right?
There you go.
And you're going to rise to the occasion. If you, thoroughbreds, you get fast when you run with thoroughbreds. And the best place to be is the fourth guy in the relay leg because the other three guys are faster and now you're getting pulled up by those guys that are faster than you, right?
Pretty good. I want to, so I think agility, and what gets me is another part is you see a lot of, I always call it fast feet, and I've been talking about it for years, and I'm like, part of my language, can we cuss?
Yeah.
Can we cuss?
What
It's
the fuck-
your podcast.
What I always say, what the fuck is fast feet? All right, you got all these fancy cone drills and ladder drills and all these drills, right? And like, oh man, he's fast feet. Got to train fast feet. And it goes back to what are fast feet, right? When on the football field, when on the baseball field, do you ever chop, chop, chop? It's always put power into the ground and accelerate forward.
I have a
You're
caveat
always
there.
trying to move forward. In any sport, you're always trying to move forward. So when I hear, oh, he's got great feet, I don't think that it translates to, yes, you have to be strong, and if you can take that strength and put the power into the ground and move in a different plane of motion, okay, it's power and strength and speed, not quote-unquote fast feet. I was thinking about that when I said, what is agility, right? Because everybody's like, oh, agile. You got agility training, cone drills, ladder drills, right? At the end of the day, right? You really chop your feet on the field? I always use Barry Sanders as an example.
Force.
Watch Barry Sanders run, right? You always want to watch the best. Christian McCaffrey. Watch Christian McCaffrey move, right? When they hit the hole or they have to go outside, it's one plant into the ground, power into the ground, and accelerate what? Forward.
What I would say is yes, but also there are times when it's not forward. The forward intent through the feet will get you backward, it will get you sideways. The forward intent has to be through the feet, and then you're going to determine athletically where you got to go from that. Okay? And if you watch Chad Ochocinco do the ladder drill, there is tremendous value for fast feet, to chop, to juke someone, to move. So it's a both sides utilized. The speed ladder is not making you faster, it's not making you more powerful.
Okay.
What it's doing is it's giving you the ability to put on the show in front of the guy, and you're reading him. If he don't bite, you go, and if he bites, you go the other way.
But he never does that in competition.
Who? The receiver?
The choppy feet.
Every time a receiver comes off the line, it's choppy.
But that's one. But what I'm talking about is when I'm speaking of agility, right? I'll use running backs as an example, right? They don't ever technically chop their feet.
Not the running back, the receiver does.
Receiver, yeah, coming off the line. But when I'm talking about downfield forward locomotion, it's one plant and go.
I agree with you on that 100%. But
And the problem is
it's baby with bathwater, okay? Because some guy's going to say, oh, he's doing his speed ladder and stuff. Yes, you're right. He's not running faster 40s from the speed ladder, but is he a better football player? I would say Chad Ochocinco. Watch his drills. His feet are unbelievable. He had the best feet in the NFL ever.
What you're arguing a little bit about is open chain versus closed chain movement, and in drilling, there's going to be some, closed chain prescriptive type movement that you're trying to get a response from. But in a game situation, they might do things that, like Vince Anderson used to say, training should look like competition. And so, if you're keeping an athlete inside of a closed chain environment doing agility drills, it's not that it's bad for them, but it just might be a little different than what they do in a game. And so, like, what I try to do is to teach an athlete how to push their feet in 3 dimensions. Sagittal, frontal, transverse plane movement of learning how to push through their feet. And then they can apply that in their sport, which really isn't our job as performance coaches. Our job is to make them more, produce more force, be more efficient in those movement patterns. You said it first, of movement's king. Then they apply that in the sport. Now, if you're a running back specific coach and you're teaching how to run outside zone a certain way, then that's a different, that's a different deal. I also think we also have to all be careful of Christian McCaffrey and some of these high-end athletes. They're gifted and they're different. They do things differently than the young developing athlete that we're trying to do.
I think that was my next question is something like the ladders may be from a coordination standpoint, and what we do on the ground is good for youth athletes, right? So
yeah, there's some of those things that aren't terrible. Of all training is from a 30,000-foot view is getting a stimulus from adaptation, or providing a stimulus and getting an adaptation. So if some of those things provide that, then that's good. And I also think too, let me go way outside the box here for a second, because we all sit up here and discuss, the physiology and all these scientific things. Well, there's the relational component of what an athlete believes in, and what you're able to disseminate to them is the right way to train. And if I line up as I'm the ladder guy, and I'm the expert in the field, and that athlete believes in it, then you watch how that translates to the game situation, right? So, I have examples of, hey, I trained this group of athletes in 2009, and we won a state championship with a high-volume track program, high volume. And then 10 years later, I did the same exact thing with very low volume. And what's the common denominator is how I was disseminating that information and that the athletes believed in it is, in my opinion, sometimes more important than perfect programming, coaching cues, and all these other things that we argue about.
I always say that dumb coaches can still win.
Sure.
Oh, there's dumb coaches everywhere.
Yes.
But I tell you what they have is charisma.
That's right.
They can sell ice cubes to Eskimos.
Yeah.
And the kids, I mean, my high school football coach was not a good coach. He did everything wrong, but I'd take a bullet for him.
Yep.
I'd take a bullet for him. And when that happens, you may still win.
Right.
Because
It
dumb is...
makes you a better athlete.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
Makes
most...
you a
For
better
sure.
person, yeah.
And, you know, so relationships are really important.
I mean, one of the most arrogant things you hear people say, like, you know, Michael Johnson, oh, he had bad arms. Man, if I could have worked with that guy and made his arms a little better, he might have held the world record for 25 years instead of 23
I'd
years.
say he did great with his arms.
I think he did okay.
Yeah, well, I would say that I could watch the video and tell you how he did great.
I mean, you know, Abby Steiner, you know, you look at some of these athletes that maybe don't fit the perfect mold of how we would all draw it up of exactly how we think it should go as performance coaches. Sometimes there's just a great belief in what they have done, and then it's executed in sport.
Sometimes, well, not sometimes. When I work with somebody, I don't coach like you guys with continuity. I more consult. So I'm a piece, and then I'm out of it, then a piece, and I'm out of it. I'm not the day-to-day. I just lost my train of thought. The buy-in, right? So when an athlete comes to me, the first question I ask is, when is your next competition? Because if it's 2 weeks from today, we're not doing much right now because I don't want you in no man's land. Buy-in is absolutely critical, right? And you get the buy-in, you'll get better results. Dumbo's flying around, he's got a feather, okay? He buys in, and I don't care. It's working.
I think it's
But-
one of the magic to what Tony does, right? I mean, he's got these athletes that come in that may not otherwise even want to train. Training's hard,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Most
right.
most people, you know, not most people, but a lot of athletes, even ones that we work with, they don't really want to be there. Their coaches made them be there. Their parents made them be there. And so if you've made it fun and, you know, now we're bringing these cats in that, you know, might not otherwise run track or play basketball or whatever, they got a chance. And so in my opinion, that's a huge component that we don't talk about enough. We all want to sit around and, you know, piss about, you know, I do this and you do that and this is better and that's better. And the answer is probably yes, you know, to all of it at some level. It's how you disseminate it.
Getting better numbers on the clock is extremely fun.
Yep.
Like, there's nothing more fun than
It's a game.
Setting a PR is like the most fun thing that
That's right.
there is, right? And what I would also say is the upper body determines balance, okay? The feet can do what they can do only if the rest of the body is funneling the force to the foot properly. Because if your body's not right and you can't send the force, then I don't sort of care about your feet, because that's not the critical problem. Sure. You have to put your body in a position where the foot can now do what it can do.
Something that's a common denominator on this panel is that each one of you gentlemen seem to be very firmly strong in your belief system about how to train in your methods. That belief, as you said, is something that you can stand in front of your athletes and also make them believe, make them perform. So my question to you is, where do you get your belief? How do you know what you know is true? And so that you can be in front of anyone and say, this is what I do and this is who I am. Where does that come from?
I think for me, I lean on 30 years of being in the trenches, you know, of it's sexy to train Christian. It's sexy to work with, you know, Mary Beth Sant and like some of these really elite athletes. But when you're coaching JV track and, you know, taking a kid from 17 seconds down to 14 and a half seconds in the 100 meters, like that's where the real, you're formulating your ideas, you're seeing what is working and what isn't working. And, you know, over time, you formulate what your system or what you believe in. I mean, I get reached out to all the time, like, man, I want to do what you do. I want to work with pro athletes. No. What should I do? No. And the answer is lock in for the next 3 decades. You know?
I love it.
You know, it doesn't happen overnight. I'm not going to read a book. I'm not going to watch, you know, Alex's landmine stuff and David's movement, Tony's stuff, and then go, I'm ready to train a pro athlete right now. there's so much that goes into it of, and what you see on Instagram, what you see on, social media is bullshit. Not everything that you see there is reality on the day-to-day with the thousands of athletes that you work with. So I think there's a huge component to just learning along the way, keeping the good, throwing away the bad, consulting, spending a ton of time listening to other people smarter than you are. And, and then you'll formulate. And then, so if you're asking me, that's where I got my beliefs is 3 decades of just paying attention.
I was going to say that I'll get sciencey on you here, but I'm a folksy science guy. I used to tell my chemistry kids that science is basically you have a hunch, and then you try it out, experimentation, and then you write shit down. And what I wrote down were times and vertical jumps and horizontal jumps. I started to record, rank, and publish in 1999 when I started feeding the cats. I really got that from BFS. That took really good records.
Bigger, faster, stronger.
Bigger, faster,
Great
stronger.
reference. Great reference.
They hate me now. But
Bigger, faster, stronger hates you now?
yeah, Kim Goss is a guy, I guess. But
I'm sorry.
but anyway, yeah, it's yeah.
Does anybody in the audience remember BFS?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean,
1980s
it was
high
pretty
school
solid.
football.
When you think back, it was
Lifting 3 days a week, sprint and jump 2 days a week, and keep records on everything. And you change, like one time you do
remember
like
it.
5 reps, 3 sets.
dodge
Another
drills,
time,
ladder. I mean, it was.
but you wrote it down, you measured it and wrote it down. And I did that back in the 90s, and that really had a huge impact on my Feed the Cat stuff. So basically, that's all my data. That's my data. So I knew that I was on the right track. I knew things were going well. But the thing that really gives me confidence is affirmation. I have a coaching tree of coaches out there that feed the cats. And now I have a coaching tree of football coaches out there that are sprint-based football, and they're winning, and they're winning. And when I was sent this article of Christian McCaffrey, like 5 years ago, by like 28 people saying, hey, this guy that's training McCaffrey, he's feeding the cats. And so I found out the guy's name, Brian Kula, and I called him. I said, this is Tony Holler. And he said, who? I said,
Tony Holler.
Tony Holler.
Tony.
And I said, I'm the Feed the Cats guy. And he goes, I've never heard of you. And it was so beautiful. And that's the start of a beautiful relationship, right? And so what was so beautiful about that is that we both evolved into the same ideas, like in evolution, like animals, they're like totally different. If they're in a place where they need to evolve into a certain type of predator or something, we both evolved into the same thing. We called it different things, but I think the affirmation that there's people out there like Brian that's getting great results from a less is more, record, rank, and publish, sprint-based, do less. That's what really makes me feel confident now.
Athletic inadequacy is my secret power or superpower because I'm athletic enough to know when something is worth investing more time and effort into it and when to cut bait, it's not going to yield fruit. And so I'm Division III because there's no Division IV. That's who I am. Right? The only medal I could win was, I'm the third leg on the relay. Don't lose it for us, right?
I'm going to touch on what David is, where I'm from, and Brian knows where I'm from, right?
Yep.
Little podunk town, right?
Raton, baby.
Yeah, Raton, New Mexico is, and mine is just based on mistakes, right? I think we've all, you see, Brian's working with this guy, Tony's working with this guy, David's working with this guy, the echelon, right? That's what gets seen, right? But what you don't see, it goes back to what you say. You don't see all of the mistakes and things you did to the 30, 40 years leading up to where you are right now. That makes you guys look like you're superstars, right?
Oh.
You look great, right? Right now, you guys look great, right? You guys, I mean, it's blowing up. Your Instagram's blowing up. That's blowing up. But what people don't see, and the young kids that don't see, and the people are and I was talking to Firepod today, right? Is, I mean, the things we've done prior to where we are right now, I mean, mistake, mistake. Every time I go and talk, I always say nobody has made more mistakes than I have, right? Using, right,
I have.
whatever. But the thing is, that the beauty of it is, okay, I made that mistake. I'm going to do this, right? And I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. My staff teases me now because I always tell them I'm going to, you guys are athletes are coming out. I'm like, oh, you guys happen to catch me in a transitional phase of my life, right? I'm not the old, the stand there and, just hard, just punch them hard in the face, right? And go, right? Now I'm like, no, we need to do a little bit more like this way. Let's do it this way. No, not so hard. Dylan, take it easy on the kids. No, they don't need to do that, right? It'll be easy, right? So it's mistakes that have led to the evolution of Feed the Cats, evolution of Kula performance, evolution of Weck method, evolution of whatever it may be, is what everybody sees now is, how cool is Kula in his new facility.
Hey.
How cool is Tony Holler? He's getting, to do all these cool events and blah, blah, blah. And David Weck has done this and done that, right? But what nobody ever sees is all the things we fucked up along the way.
Hey, let's be thankful that social media wasn't around when I first started coaching.
Fact, dude. Oh, I tell my staff, I'm like, I remember, coming out of college and moving up to Alaska and doing my first session. I think to myself, it was just fucking terrible. It was terrible. I wouldn't have paid me. I always say to people, I wouldn't have paid me $5 an hour to do that.
Hey, I'm telling you, I'll tell you a true story. I competed in the decathlon in college, and I was competing against Dan O'Brien at a meet.
Oh, really?
Mount Sac,
Dave and Dan.
Mount Sac Relays out in California. And I was obsessed with him because he was a world record holder at the time. That's what I wanted to aspire to be. And I watched him. I'd go to meets, I'd watch him. And, he was put together. He was a unit, right? The guy was just unbelievable. And, I kind of noticed it seemed like, right, he had like his, he had the great glutes and like it always seemed like his hips were kind of tilted forward, kind of chest out. So my first year of coaching as a head track coach, I'm 23 years old, just fresh off, my college career. And I'm out in front of the kids teaching them to tilt their hips forward, right? And everybody in the room right now knows that that's wrong, right? I mean, raise your hand if you don't know that's wrong. Okay, so again, to your point of mistakes, like, God, if that was anywhere documented now, like I'd be worthless today, right? So you make those mistakes as a young coach, and then you grow out of them, and that's how you hone your skills to get to,
And that's the key. I think if you're not embarrassed and cringy about a lot of things in your past, that means you haven't grown.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that's why we grow.
Sure.
Switching gears, we're going to go to a little more technical question. This is a question I have for each one of you. When, if ever, do you train your athletes with heels on the ground? And if you do, why?
I think there's some times when when I try to get an athlete's heels on the ground, we're working through tissue resiliency, trying to make sure we have good ankle mobility. Would be an example that I can think of when we're trying to keep the heel on the ground and move through in our three-dimensional movement series that we do. We'll try to keep all the feet on the ground. I think at times, there's athletes when they change directions in deceleration or change of direction where the whole foot, does hit the ground. And so I think there's times in change of direction work where it's okay to teach a kid to, an athlete to put the whole foot into the ground for, maximum force absorption and production. So, not a lot is the answer. And I think sometimes when they're, for me, and again, I'm not as well versed in in David's methods and, Bam with some of your animal movement stuff. And however, like when we're lifting, I sometimes want full force production into the ground. And so we're going to have heels and toes. So I think sometimes in the weight room, we're going to have heels on the ground.
We do on our, what we call cat jumps.
Yep.
They're actually depth jumps, but I threw a cat off a roof in 1964. And so I call them cat jumps. But we do land full-footed because if you land on the balls of your feet, you have no balance. Mm-hmm. But, we basically just jump off of high things like the Russians used to do to absorb force. And as soon as our feet touch, our entire body freezes. And so we do that a lot. But I don't really talk about heels much in sprinting. When you time a lot, if a kid's landing on the back of his heels, he's going to be slow.
Yes.
And that's the beautiful things about timing, is that kids will organically figure some stuff out when you time them. You don't have to go through a 101-point checklist with them. They wouldn't learn it anyway, and so, yeah, they just figure it out. And so I don't talk about, like never say run on your toes. People from the stands say that all the time, run your toes. I'm like, but I don't say run on your heels either.
Right. The way I looked at it was I wanted to have the capacity to not need my heels. So that, and I'll talk about it tomorrow, so this foot within a foot principle, so that the ball of the foot has the heel, the fourth and fifth metatarsals now being the heel leveraged forward. And you can do things with the body such that you have tremendous strength and stability without the heels. But in athletics, if you're going to dunk a basketball, you're going to jam that heel.
That's right.
Right? I call it the 8 ball, right? That's the 8 ball. You drop the 8 ball, you're going to go higher, right? There's more time on the ground.
You're just saying more range of motion at the ankle?
Not even range of motion, but the capacity to not need the heel so I can use the heel. Because if I need the heel, he's not available now.
I don't understand. Explain that.
So basically, if I'm an athlete and I need to go into my heels, otherwise I lost my balance, right? That heel is occupied recovering your balance, where you would be better off if you didn't need the heel. As if the outside ball of the foot, that I call it the green dot, fourth and fifth metatarsals, that can be your heel.
Okay.
Outside blade.
It's the outside. And the initiation point, okay, I call it the green dot. I called it the green dot for a lot of years. The initiation is the fourth and fifth metatarsals. That's where the foot is going to initiate ground contact, is on that outside ball of foot edge. Boom, and then you cycle it. And biomechanically, from a structural standpoint, the fourth and fifth metatarsals, they tie directly into the calcaneus, the heel bone, but the big toe, second toe, and third toe, they come up and they tie into the talus on top. So you literally have 2 floors. And I'll show you guys in a slide tomorrow what I'm talking about. But structurally, the outside 4 and 5, that is ground floor 1. And we call that the go zone. And then the big toe, second toe, third toe is the go to. And go sets up go to. But if I go to.
Go to then
without
to the big toe.
go.
Off the big toe. You got to go off the big toe, right?
If you're going to cut off a toe, just don't cut off the big one.
All right.
Okay?
My biomechanics
Sacrifice
professor-
the pinky.
My biomechanics professor said, if you ever get in trouble with the mafia, I don't know why he told us this, don't let them cut off your thumbs or your big toes. And for some reason, that's the only thing I think I learned in college.
Yeah, right.
Don't cut your thumbs off and don't cut your toes off.
No, the big
And you're
toe.
like, okay,
Big toe.
do anything without your thumbs, right?
Yeah, the big toe needs a little, a preamble of the outside to get you to the inside, right?
Which also makes the glute fire.
Yes,
The
you
big
get
toe
you get a tie-in.
makes the glute fire.
The
Think
flex-
about that. Think about that tie-in.
Yeah,
Well, and
I mean,
then-
do you call it a fascial line? Is it a fascial line?
You
Or is
could
it
call
just
it that.
nervous?
No,
It's gotta be a fascial
no.
line.
There's structure to it. The flexor,
chain.
the flexor hallucis longus is a very important muscle with a huge long tendon that ties into the tip of the big toe.
How many people that you hear that say, hey, train the big toe?
Yeah, I think you should.
I don't know. We can have that discussion, right? When do you
Well-
ever hear anybody say, "Hey, we need to train the big toe"?
I say don't get turf toe.
Yeah, it was Deion Sanders' career, didn't it? Turf toe. Remember when Deion Sanders got turf toe?
Yeah, that's why he
It
stopped
ruined you.
It
playing.
completely
It'll
humbled
ruin
him.
you.
That's
right?
why
That
he
was it.
stopped. He had to stop because of his toes.
Turf toe.
Turf toe.
Right? Nobody knows
Turf
what
toe
turf
is
toe
an
is.
it's an insidious injury, and I experiment a lot, so I use my imagination. I use experimentation.
You don't say.
I do say, as humiliating as it can be. So through the years, I've done some experiments that didn't exactly go as I had hoped they would.
You don't say.
Yes, I do. What happens? A human being, you're basically the calcaneus is on the ground constantly when you walk as a human being. The cats, they're up on the metatarsal heads, okay, and they can go vertical with the metatarsal head. So I tried to do that, and I was doing staircase stuff. And I did nerve damage, like a Morton's neuroma, by
Of course.
driving my metatarsals down vertical. Like, oh, I'm not built to do that. Oh, and Morton's neuroma, which is essentially it's like where the second toe and the third toe, it just hurts like hell, and it upsets your gait for months, okay, months. And that is also another opportunity to now work through that. I used to hate getting injured, and I'm relatively fragile compared to like a great athlete, so I get hurt more than the great ones. Now, the injuries, I don't sweat them because it's just an opportunity for me to learn more how to navigate and go put out the fire even though my hamstring doesn't work right now, right? So the experimentation process, when you, mailbox money, okay, the Bosu ball, home run, it doesn't matter what I do, right? I could do anything. It doesn't matter. So I experiment, and I would never experiment on another person. Right? I'm not going to go in with a hunch and say, I got this theory, and let's try this. I won't do that until I've already done it through myself to vet it enough that it's responsible to even suggest that you try something.
Bam, bringing it back to what you asked, I mean, I think too, like, don't we all feel like we all have a plan until we get punched in the face?
Yeah, there you go.
And sports, you don't always know how your foot's going to interact with the ground. Basketball, football, like unplanned, open chain movement is going to present all kinds of different ways the foot interacts with the
You
ground.
can go turf, then you can go natural grass. You can have that argument too, right?
Sure.
Is your foot going to react different to natural turf? Is your foot going to reaction different to the track? Is your foot, act different on
Yeah.
regular grass?
Yeah, the
Right,
answer
but
is yes.
point
Yes.
being,
Yeah.
you set up training, and in a perfect world, we'd love to go here to Big Toe and have all that in place, and you should train that. But then you also should be set up and train three-dimensional movement. What happens when X happens? Because you can train a certain way, and then you present a 240-pound middle linebacker that's trying to take your head off, and you're going to move however you need to move, to survive. And so I think you have to expose heels, toes, all kinds of different ways in training.
And I think that what I kept thinking about when you were saying that is I'm a huge multi-sport guy. I think any coach that's arguing, or trainer, or anybody who argues to a kid that they should not play basketball and run track and just play football only, this is how you're going to be good. No. That choreographed agility is choreographed agility.
That's right.
Whereas basketball is, you don't even have time to think. No. Your body reacts, and you're constantly forced. Basketball players are my most durable track athletes. Okay? Now, you start with that. They never get hurt. You start with that and say, why? I think it's an agility, right, left, twisting, running backwards. You're constantly forced to do non-choreographed agility work. And not only does that make you a better football player, it makes you more durable.
Yeah, if everything's linear in your training and to perfection to maximum output, then what happens when that isn't the case in sport?
Yep. So what it goes back to the question, and now here we are, right, is it's all based on, okay, you're playing baseball all year, you're playing this sport all year, you're playing that, but it goes back to what you just said. Who are your most durable athletes? Basketball.
Multi-sport.
Yeah. Multi-sport.
Yep.
My college football coach used to say, if you want to find out if he's athletic, put him on a basketball court, right? Because,
So why are we? We can go down this rabbit hole a little bit. So why are we now with youth sports? Injury rates are skyrocketing, right? It's like, and I say this, when I talk, it's like movement, performance, skill, right? Parents will pay a hitting coach $1,000 an hour, right? But they won't pay somebody like us to teach them how to move correctly, right? And so here we are now, right? Everything what you just said is if we can get these kids moving better, right? Like in basketball, right? Why is basketball so great? One, you're on a hard surface, okay, which there's no ground for, no absorption whatsoever.
but it's a wonderful surface because it's sprung wood.
That is so
good for
it
your
forces
body.
the athlete to use their natural capacity, right, of what God gave us through stretch reflex, flexibility, movement, stretch. When I say stretch reflex, the ability to stretch and contract at the same time, because there's no absorption into the ground, right? So the muscle and the human body has to absorb that like we were designed to do.
So you just answered the question of how do you set up training. if basketball's a good metric, then shouldn't training look like those movements?
And that's
So
why
you don't
what
have
we
to
do in our X Factor work is we try to copy basketball type movements.
X Factor?
X Factor is exercises that we do on days we don't sprint. We don't do tempo running, ever. We don't run laps and stuff.
Nice.
So we sprint 2 days a week in the off season.
This is important. That's why I want to ask
Then
that
we do
question.
X Factor, which are exercises. Probably the main is plyos, but we do depth jumps. We do hip mobility.
Why doesn't anybody do that anymore, though? Plyos. I remember you talked about the Russians. Think of I have a slide that I show, right? And it's so I was taught by an individual who actually went and trained with Russian physiologists. And I say this to everybody: is everything we know now, right, was all based on what the Russians did. And the big thing that the Russians did was a lot of plyometric work.
Sure.
Right.
Now,
Which
I
led to a
disagree with
lot-
periodization, but I agree with the plyos and the types
Sure.
of exercises that they had a hunch would improve speed because you can't sprint every day.
Right.
Great.
And sprinting in a straight line at top speed may be a priority, but it's not the majority.
That's right.
And you better be doing other things, and we don't jog as the other things. we do stuff that, like med ball throws. I mean, that makes us more durable. We
That
throw.
also- it's plyometric.
It's for sure.
Yeah.
And we do all kinds of collision training that Dan Fichter and, of course, Jay Schroeder back in the Archuleta days. And
Have you? Who knows? Who has ever seen that? I don't think anybody knows who Schroeder is.
I do.
yeah, it's
Not very many people know that guy. The things he was doing, and I remember as a kid seeing the things he was doing. What was?
Freak of Training
Yeah.
was
Right.
the name of the video. Freak
Right.
of
I remember
Training.
that guy. He had 225 on, right? He's bench pressing, and he was flinging it off his body,
Yeah.
catching it, flinging it, and then he was doing stuff on the ground, right? It's but
Adam Archuleta.
yes, that's it, Adam Archuleta.
And I did a podcast with him. If you ever want to look it up
I
on my
just watched
YouTube,
it. I
right?
just watched
it's
it a
pretty
week
good.
ago. Yeah.
And they used to do things with him where they would lift him in a prone position and drop him like a depth jump, except for he had to catch himself.
Hands.
like dropping a cat off a building.
Yes, exactly. And that 1964 was a seminal moment for Feed the Cats. So anyway, Schroeder believed that in sprinting, if you think about it, is collisions with the ground
Yes.
with no collapse. And so collision training really has, and that's what plyometrics is.
Yeah.
It's just where it's at.
But it's almost like it's a forgotten art. Goes back to the whole strength thing, right? Is a coach, right, is more willing to put somebody in the rack and say, okay, we're going to squat, we're going to bench, we're going to dead, we're going to clean, whatever that is, right? Goes back to say the Husker Power Days, right? Right.
Yep.
Hard and just fucking heavy.
Brian, tell the story. The first night we were having a drink and an appetizer, and I said, okay.
And a bourbon.
Yeah. And I said, I gotta go home. I'm tired. And I said, give me the one thing in the weight room that I should know.
Yeah. I mean, everybody
You
knows.
remember,
I'm-
right?
Yeah, I'm a deadlift guy. I think, and I'll actually talk about it tomorrow in my talk a little bit about why I'm obsessed with the deadlift. But, it's a movement in the weight room that's ground based. Your feet are on the ground. You're applying force to the ground, and you can lift a lot of weight.
There's no bar on the back.
No spinal loading.
Yeah.
You have to work with slack.
That's right.
This is the Barry Ross with Allison
Yep,
Felix.
yep. I'm
Yeah.
on.
Underground Secrets.
The
If
consent-
anybody wants the PDF of Underground Secrets, I have it.
Yeah.
And I'll send it to you for free.
Yeah, it was the concentric only deadlift.
Yep, that's
and then
right.
a guy named Ryan.
Supersetted with.
Plyometrics.
Yeah, and Ryan Flaherty is a
Yep.
speed coach who basically took the Barry Ross straight bar deadlift and said, all right, well, let's do it with the trap bar
That's
deadlift.
right.
Safer.
A little lower entry point for younger
Yeah.
athletes, things like a little safer.
Right, right.
Yeah, and it's force production.
Yeah,
And
the
so
mass specific force,
Mass-specific
concentric
force.
Call it
only.
mass-specific
You're not.
force.
You're not.
And then
tissue
there's
trauma.
a 5-minute sit
Yes.
Yeah, rest recovery for
Rest.
ATP
that
to
Christian
replenish
didn't
fully.
like doing.
No, he adapted to it.
Okay.
But most athletes don't like it. I
Right.
mean, your weight coach, if you're in a school system or a college or whatever, your weight coach will freak out, right? Because sitting for 5 minutes while ATP replenishes is like that's a no-no, right? We got to keep going, got to keep moving. But then
but-
you're lifting under fatigue.
But what a sport.
What's that?
It goes back to, and we're not waiting for 5 minutes, right? But when you say ATP replenishment, right? Is you're going to that bar and you're lifting that thing as hard and as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah.
What is sport?
It's the same
Down,
thing.
set, hand the ball. What do you do? As hard as you possibly can for 2 to 6 seconds.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've just always believed, and I think, you asked this a little bit ago, and now I've gotten off track to smidge, but, you have to find, how are you changing the energy systems, or how are you training the energy systems that apply to sport, right? You can be a trainer and run a training program for an athlete. They don't have to be playing basketball, but if the training has some of those same components to it, then you're accomplishing the same goal. I'm a big multi-sport guy, but you don't have to play basketball to expose to all those different movements. You just make sure that your training then is, exposing athletes to those different movements.
Let me just say something. There's something about basketball, too, because I was obsessed with being able to dunk. So 1984, I'm 14 years old, and I'm at the library going through microfilm for 2 hours to find a 3-paragraph article about plyometrics, right? And then I met this pro soccer guy who showed me some plyometrics, right? And I got to dunk a volleyball. That was the greatest I could ever do. But the external focus and drive lets you just intuit the things, and then you get the feedback. Did you dunk it or did you not? And just the energy and the drive to do another rep.
Sure.
It's fun.
By the way, that's probably the most underrated exercise in the world.
Which?
The dunk.
Oh, the dunk. Yeah.
I wish every gym would have some 8-foot and 9-foot and 9-6 baskets, and give them.
Amen.
It's the most aggressive.
It's
explosive.
They will try as hard as they possibly can.
So
it's
check
fun.
this out.
It's fun.
So check this out. Alex Kanellis, I don't know if he's still in here, but Alex Kanellis has an adjustable basketball rim, okay? So every kid gets to dunk because you just set it right where it needs to be for that kid.
Yep.
Right?
Explosive, aggressive, a multi everything.
Yeah. And you don't get in your own way because you have that external objective that is the focus. So you're not sitting there inside yourself like, what am I supposed to do? The ball actually like sort of carries you with it.
That's fun.
It's fun.
We have one more question, and then we're going to go to audience questions after this. Not everyone has to answer this if you're not doing it, but what do you know? We are at Uberzati HQ. Reason I'm here is because of these machines back there and the community, but most importantly because of those guys, those Z treads. What do you know about high performance tread training for speed development, if anything?
Everybody looked at me.
Yeah.
I mean,
Just to clarify, I heard that you bought 6 of these. 4 of these?
coming soon.
He has 2 at his facility.
Yeah, we put 2 at our facility in Denver. I got connected to these guys and came down and looked at them. It kind of blew my mind. I'd seen high-speed treadmills, and I kind of liked the idea, but then actually sitting down with Beau and Tim and listening to the rationale of why they were using them and how they were using them from as a speed guy, finding ways to maybe more efficiently or effectively create and reinforce better triple flexion, triple extension, ground interaction, which really in my mind are the 3 major components of sprinting, was next level. It was just an easier path to reinforce the things that we were trying to teach, on the ground. And I wasn't somebody who wanted to throw out what we'd already done. I just felt like it was something that would enhance what we were doing. And so, and I've now had them for 6 months. I've experimented with them with different, levels of athletes, from youth athletes up to my professional 800-meter runner that we're working with right now. And I'll talk more about that tomorrow. But, I think it's just something that gives repetitiveness. There's a self-organization component to it where, frankly, if you don't do it right, you're coming off the back end of it. And so there's something really rich in that of, you can have somebody do something on the ground, and if they fail, there's no nothing bad's going to happen to them. Here, you kind of got to get it done. So I also, for me, as a technical kind of mechanic psycho, I love the ability to be able to coach in proximity to the athlete while they're running, right? When an athlete runs a fly 10, you can video it, you can break it down, you can talk to them, but you don't really get to fix anything in real time. If a kid's dribbling a basketball and you want to fix something, you can walk over and fix, how they're dribbling the basketball. But in sprinting, it's really hard just from a proximity, deal. Not to mention, I am reside in Denver, Colorado, where it's cold, and so oftentimes we don't have the ability to go out and run. Now, I'm now fortunate enough to have a facility where we can do some of that, but it still gives me a chance to look at an athlete over, 40 meters, 50 meters, 60 meters, whatever the 6 to 10 seconds that we're going to run on the treadmill, and actually make physical adjustments during a repetition. So for me, it's been a complete game changer to reinforce, what we're already teaching on the ground.
For me, I don't work at a private facility, and I'm a school teacher, so I don't have any money. But it makes a lot of sense to me that there's so many high schools in the north that have a weight room only off season. At least the Feed the Cat schools now are putting like runways in a long hallway. There's one school in South Dakota that's rewritten all their records doing the Feed the Cat stuff, that's put a track surface down in their longest hallway. Now that's a commitment that I like. Yeah. But the idea that you could have a couple of speed things in a weight room in cold weather states where you have nowhere to train would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
What I would say is that sprinting is done in the air. So everything is about the setup, so land, load, launch happens the best, right? That's everything.
Set, land,
load, launch.
Sure, I was trying to get that.
I was trying to.
Yeah, land,
load,
right.
launch.
Right.
So you got to land it, you got to load it, you got to launch it.
Correct. Okay.
Right? And so if you look at a 100-meter dash, you have no opponent who can do anything to you other than psychologically, right? There's nobody nobody trying to tackle you, right? The 100-meter dash is just a balancing act of 45 perfect steps, essentially. And when you see lane drift, where Carl Lewis almost runs off the long jump board, he'd always veer to the right, and there was a reason why he did that. Whereas if you didn't have that deviation, you might be a little bit faster to the line. So it's a balancing act. And so with the high-speed treadmill, it's really the nervous system that you're able to stimulate at speeds that you're not capable of attaining by your own doing. And so you meet the challenge, and I view it as a balancing act to be perfect on land, load, launch, and then perfect on land, load, launch, and you're just casting those, and then you get a stride frequency that is faster than you could do yourself.
Do you see it as overspeed?
Yeah, I think the misconception about them is the speed of the treadmill, whereas I have grown to know that the incline of the treadmill is actually where the gold is.
Interesting.
Because
nobody ever run. Someone put it. I think it was Power Athlete, and I'll give those guys credit. I had a talk with him one time. He's like, nobody ever runs uphill wrong.
You have to. You have to coil to do it.
I don't know who mentioned it today, right?
Yeah.
When you're running up a hill, right, or someone to say riding a bike up a hill, right?
Yeah,
you have to drive, and you have to put.
Yes, right.
We can get into the head over toe, right? But when you're running up a hill, it's really hard for the human body to run wrong up a hill.
Correct.
There's a lot of parameters you have to put into place to get up that hill. Running flat, you can talk about overspeed, but I think one thing too, Tony mentioned, you said aggression, and when you're trying to dunk a basketball, it's
explosive, aggressive, multi-joint. It's a full body.
If you can teach somebody to do that, I think you have the capacity to do anything.
Right. Well, the development of when there's a hill, you have to be good in triple flexion, right? You have to get the knee up. You have to have the heel recovery. In ground interaction, if you're not dorsiflexed, then you're basically tripping at the top.
That's the thing.
It forces you into triple extension, right? Because the belt's moving, so there's a level of getting forced into that extension that you can't get otherwise.
And the problem with running up a hill is it slows you down, but this doesn't.
No, yeah,
right?
Speed stays the same.
It's a higher speed than you could ever run uphill.
Right.
That's my point.
Right.
That's my point.
Extension is really where most young athletes are limited. Even some high-level athletes are limited in extension, right? Flexion is typically pretty good for most people. Like I'm 52 years old, I can still flex pretty well. But when I go into extension, right, because we live our lives in flexion on phones, on our devices, sitting down, like every one of you's in flexion right now. But if we had to all of a sudden we go stand up and get into extension, that's a little more difficult So the treadmill actually pushes your foot backwards and forces some of that extension.
And some people
on
say
you.
that's bad, right? And I'm always like, well, and they're like, oh, it's not the same as running on the ground. Well, no shit, right? But getting in under a bar and squatting heavy or doing this or doing that, it's not the same as running on the ground, right? It's
Specificity
different.
is the stimulus response,
There it is.
and that
Yeah.
is the key.
That's it.
right. I mean, so these people who say, "Oh, you're not doing that," you're training to work out in an earthquake.
Well, it's
You know,
not, and it's not the only thing you do, right? I mean, even these guys who built a company around a treadmill
Right.
are doing things on the ground, right? It's why
That's I think the point you have to make, right? Is
Yes.
we all say this, it's a tool, right? But at the end of the day, the tool that I think we all agree on is you have to sprint.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting? I had my left hip replaced like 5 months ago, and over Thanksgiving I was only out of the. So it was 2 months after surgery. I was at my brother's house for Thanksgiving, and I got on his treadmill, and it only goes 12 miles an hour, at the fastest anyway, and 12 miles an hour was too much for my hip. 12 miles an hour. And what does that say? That says that you might not be able to express more force going through unilateral limb than sprinting itself. You could be hitting 7 times body weight if you're Usain Bolt. And what exercise is there that's going to jolt 7 times body weight for less than 1/10 of a second? Not much. I don't think there's anything that I can think of.
Right.
And it really spoke to me because I did real well after the surgery. I can move real well. I could fake it. But if I had to go real fast, I couldn't do it yet because the body just couldn't handle that much force. I was surprised at 12 miles an hour. I was like, shut it down. Nope.
Or maybe it was the brain.
That's right.
The brain is a protective mother and doesn't
Yes,
give a shit
yes.
about performance.
Yes. Well, and you could say
At all.
And you could say that the body is just a root system for the brain. So it's the whole thing is the
Root
brain,
system.
right?
I love that.
The whole thing is a brain, and these are the tentacles that feeds information to the brain. But the specific trauma on my joint couldn't handle that. Now, yes, if you said here's $1 billion you go do or save the life of someone, yeah, I'll run through the pain. But the point I'm making is
That
that
goes back
sprinting,
to the brain, telling the brain to tell the muscle to fire faster, right? Because there's now
Yeah.
goes back to the numbers.
Well, it's, if
What are the numbers?
If the kid is under the car, mom can lift the car,
exactly.
right? She doesn't care that the tendons are ripping off the bone. There's something that needs to get done, and that's the brain, right? That's the body is the brain. The mind is different, but brain is body.
Brain is body.
But
Write that down.
And the nervous system is everything.
It's everything.
And that's why you don't sprint tired. Because
Amen.
now the nervous system is laying down reps and engrams and patterns that the timing is different.
Forming habits.
A 10-second 100 is different than an 11-second 100. It's just different.
Beautiful. Thank you, gentlemen. We're now going to be opening this discussion up to questions from the public. So please raise your hand and we will pass around the microphone.
Oh, baby. Yes.
So I think there's been a lot of talk, especially this morning. We did the landmine certification, barbell, different uses it has. Talked a little bit about deadlift, even moving into the X bar, doing a lot of the concentric movement there. I am just wondering what y'all's perspective is on the sled and when you would prescribe that, when you would program that, and how valuable you think it is for performance training.
I mean, I think it's a great tool. Just like anything else in performance, you have to figure out what's your goal. What are you trying to accomplish? If you're, in acceleration training to be able to produce force and have a longer ground contact, it's a great tool for using it, in acceleration work. If you're injured, and my guy Zach Woodward, he has people pushing and pulling that sled from a return to play. To stimulate VMO and some of the other things that come along with pushing and pulling a sled. So I think it's a wonderful tool. It's just like everything else in training. What are you trying to accomplish and what are you going to implement it? I mean, even in the deadlift, like I do with, say, a female track athlete, we eliminate some of the eccentric movement with a female track sprinter. Because when does a female track sprinter need to have a ton of eccentric load training? Not a lot. But with a football player, they need a lot of eccentric load training for deceleration. So we would implement that, component. So I think the sled is just another tool where, depending on what you want to get out of, the athlete, you prescribe it accordingly. That'd be my answer on the sled.
For me, because I'm coaching a group of 35 sleds, and we have one sled in the school, that's a pain in the ass to get out. We do bands and partner resistance stuff, and I think that getting the brain, once again, used to doing this without doing a stumble reflex and sticking the foot out in front of you, it's important to get into this position a lot.
Right.
So if I say we don't use sleds, it does not prove that sleds are bad. I think that we can get everything done without sleds. That's just the way I think.
One of the things that I like about the sled is that it's very easy to work hard. So, if you're and you're in that sort of that you're going slow in a position that would require speed to maintain that angle and to accelerate out. So it's like uphill in the sense that you get the acceleration angles built into the exercise, and you can do it in a manner where you're really focused on the quality of the drive and the continuity from one foot to the other, and to have like this constant pacing with the sled. And so that you're using that as a model that when you're not weighted with the sled, now I'm comfortable at that angle. My muscles know how to produce the force at that angle. And you just posted a video on X or something with the 3 guys sprinting. I did a little breakdown on it.
Yep.
The kid in the middle was stepping through the steps. So he hit with a perfect shin angle. He was off the ground. There was no yield in the heel. It was just perfect. And the kid next to him, he had dorsiflexion where like his foot went to his shin almost. And it was almost to a disadvantage because he'd hit the ground without the great shin angle, and then he'd spend a lot of time getting a great shin angle, right? So maybe if you put this kid on a sled, he could figure out how to use that dorsiflexion where he tilts the whole body to exploit the dorsiflexion as opposed to just that isolated dorsiflexion, which kept him on the ground longer than he needed to be.
Which the ankle itself is a whole other topic.
Yeah.
Chris Gorfist and Kyle Dietz are good friends, and they put out the stuff about spring ankle and stuff, and it's probably the neglected. Everything below the shin, which goes into your foot stuff. Is the most neglected stuff in sports training. That the tendon ankle complex is, and it's not that hard to say. We're going to do those 3 or 4 isometrics. There's no cost. They don't get tired.
Right.
And I think it's pretty powerful stuff, and I wish we did more.
Sleds are great, what I would call kind of like right in the middle. It's a good, you can do stuff like Tony does with the bands. There's ways to just hold a kid's T-shirt to get him some of that loaded acceleration. Sled's kind of in the middle, and then you got your high-end stuff like the ohm run and different modalities that can hold like constant speed or constant force, run rockets, different things, but those cost money.
1080.
So I think, it's 1080 all the way up on that end. But sleds are a great middle of the road modality.
Appreciate the conversation, gentlemen. It's been great. So I know this is sprint specific, and of course being the ground agility plyometric guy, I 100% agree that sprint is king, but I felt like there was some contradictory conversation about changing direction work, because I do agree basketball is a great way to gauge how a kid can change direction, but when I'm a top line sprinter, I'm not going to change direction as well as a kid that focuses on changing direction, because my shin angles are going to be different. My body angle is going to be different than it is going to be when I'm at the top of my 100-meter sprint. So my area, as a linebacker, my ability to play inside the box, my leverage is going to be different than it would be if I'm chasing somebody down. So I guess my question kind of is, I know we kind of had a conversation about this last time, Coach. Where would you see real change of direction? Because Coach Holler, you kind of said, we don't really train that, but you still want your athletes to be learning those positions. You know what I mean? If I'm going to take a kid and he wants to play basketball, I'm not going to just throw him out there, it's going to be reactionary, of course, but I want to make sure he's got a good base. He knows how to shuffle, he knows how to bend, and he knows how to flip his hips. And of course, his sprint training will help him be quicker in that, but I can't just throw him out there and expect him to figure it out on the fly. So how would you guys throw in change of direction, drills, and things like that into your training?
Well, I think the sport itself, I say that the base of my pyramid is rest, recovery, sleep, and then it's sprint, lift, jump, bounce, and then it's sport-specific movements and fundamentals. That's like the next level. I've had this kind of like an argument. Tony Villani and I used to argue when he would talk about how max speed is not important, and I'm like, who would you rather have? Somebody that runs 23 miles an hour or 18, changing directions? And he said, yeah, but the sport itself is played between 12 and 17. But still, guys that are not fast enough won't even get drafted. So I think you can do both, and really the what I've learned from Tony is he had a story the other day. Patrick Surtain, you know what a roll 90 is? It's a 10-yard fly, 5-yard lead in, but you have a right angle in it. Okay, and so you're going to time that guy in a 10-yard fly with a turn. And so Patrick Surtain, he's like one of the best defensive players in the league, ran 1.8. And Tony Villani said, at the age of 49, I'm better than that. Surtain's like, yeah, right. And Tony Villani ran 1.69. And so the key was that, it still goes back to teaching and fundamentals, that he teaches 2 good pushes and then dropping the shoulder. The key is to literally slow down to make that turn well. And obviously, Surtain could run better than Villani once he was taught. So I think that opened my eyes to the idea that there truly is teaching that goes along with agility, that it's not just run as fast as you can and take a left. I don't know if that teaches anything, but I love the idea of timing as well, that if you can show a guy, this is your time, and look at this 49-year-old guy that's better than you, that kind of like, okay,
That's a
I'm
big
gonna listen.
bucket of cold water.
But it's one cut.
It is.
One cut. So I think, and agility to me, I've been talking about it a long time, is I think with agility, less is better. When you're talking about a 90-degree turn, it's one step and go. But I think what we teach kids is it's just repetitively go. Volume, right? Is it volume or is it quality, right? I would rather have a kid do a drop jump where they drop when they come from the top down to the ground and then explode back up. Big thing is from the ground to the top, right? But if you can, a lot of kids don't have the capabilities to be able to drop from a height, touch the ground, and then come back up. To me, that's one touch. It's what you're talking about. It's plant, go, cut, right? Plant, go, cut. I think that's all it takes. I think it's with agility, in terms of your question, I think less with agility is better. But it's got to be quality of putting the power and be aggressive into the ground with a lower volume, less reps, okay, and quality of movement.
I'll answer
that
that slightly different. As a track guy, primarily, and a speed guy, we often think that that's just 100-meter straight line sprinting. But what we tried to develop was some of those similar patterns in a lateral movement, in a change of direction, type of environment. Which when we developed the Bounce Fire series, it was we can do that linear, we can do it lateral, and we can do it in change of direction. So a big metric for us is like teaching somebody how to push into the ground with their foot properly in multiple planes. And so, I get asked quite a bit because I don't know if there's many athletes that change direction better than Christian in the world. And we never do agility work. We never do agility training. We do lateral bounce fire where they learn how to where he learns how to push through the ground lateral.
One push into the ground, go. One push it in the ground, go.
Yeah.
Big
Not-
push.
Not, yeah, one big push. That's the thing. One big push.
Yeah.
Not multiple pushes.
Honestly, we do multiple pushes. So we'll do
But
so when we go when we do a sprint drill forward, we're also going to do sprint drill lateral. And we do that repetitively so that he learns how to, because I think that's one thing that misses in a lot is, again, somebody said it earlier, of we don't focus on the complex below the knee, right? The ground interaction is a huge component of linear speed, change of direction, lateral speed. And so if we teach that, we have to teach it just as much as we teach the linear speed concepts. Then, to Tony's point, let the sport train the sport. So once we've taught a football player to push into the ground laterally really well, and that timing and all that force production's in place, then when they go with their running backs coach, their wide receiver coach, and they start to put it into practice, they move out of those positions better. But, it's not my job as a performance coach to teach the wide receiver how to plant and run a slant pattern. So, I coach some football, so I can do that a little bit, but it's really more of just teaching their body how to push through the ground in different planes.
And you do this for track athletes as well.
100%.
And why is it that doing non-straightforward running improves straightforward running?
Say that again.
I got some
Okay,
answers.
if
a
you only
question right there.
if you only run,
I think that could be the biggest question of the night.
if you can, we only run north. We don't run east, west, or south in track.
Right.
But yet you're going to train multi-planes, and I totally agree. That's what we do in X Factor. But why? I do it for durability.
Yep.
What do you do it for?
Same. I think it's total athletic development and health, right? You see a lot of adductor strains or
This is not healthy, is it?
not
if that's all you do?
if it's the only thing you do.
Right.
Sure. Now again, you even said it yourself. It should be the primary.
Yes.
But maybe not the majority, and that there needs to be. And for me, part of goes back to that 3 decades of I used to not probably understand linear speed development as well as I do now. And so I was doing more lateral training with athletes, with my track athletes. We did a lot of lateral stuff. And I probably had a lot less hamstring injuries, to be honest with you. So, if there's total development in the glutes and the adductors and the hip flexors, the psoas, like all those things as you move through the 3 dimensions of movement, you see a lot less injuries. And we'd all agree that the best athlete's the available athlete.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
So-
the most important.
And that's interesting too. You use the word 3D, and when I have a question, I'll go to Corfist and I'll say, okay, why is it that Nordics don't work? Oh, I hope I didn't hurt anybody's feelings. Okay, it's all right. Maybe it works for you. But why does that not bulletproof the hamstrings? And he said because the hamstring is 3D, that there's 3 heads to the hamstring, and if you're only doing a 2-dimensional thing, like I had a really good athlete strain a hamstring last weekend on our tight curve. He had never put that hamstring into that position. And also his calf was hard as a rock, which means his hamstring was doing the calf's job. So anyway, we learned these things. But the hamstring is 3-dimensional, which is probably the reason why we need to do multi-directional, multi-planar stuff, right?
Yeah. That's our Bounce Fire series is 3-dimensional by design.
Right.
And I'm a straight line linear speed guy, but I think you have to be able to push laterally and in different planes.
And that sure doesn't hurt football or baseball or basketball, right?
Only
It's
helps.
pretty good
Only
for it.
helps.
Only helps. Straight line, okay? The A to B, the fastest way there is a straight line. But a straight line is a construct because everything in the body is rotating. And you're playing catch with the right and the left sides, right?
Say that
And-
again. The rotation. Right?
So
Nobody
every-
thinks about rotation in a
every-
linear
you're-
plane, right?
you're-
What is you can't if you're a straight ahead guy, you can't be rotating. That's what people think.
No, everything
No, I'm
inside
saying
yeah.
you need to rotate,
Right.
but
What
I
I'm
think
saying,
what people think is if you're running a straight line, you need to be straight.
Yeah, no.
Yes, straight. Just, yeah.
The
I call it Barbie arms.
Yeah, the physics, right,
You know?
the physics of it are that your center of, if I'm a straight line guy and I want to run the 100, is all I care about.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that is straight is my center of mass in relation to the start and the finish. The center of mass goes straight and everything is rotating to make that thing go straight because you're playing catch from side to side. And so I think, and this is some of the stuff that I've been exploring and we'll dive into more, but using arcs and curves to enhance your ability to go straight faster, because there's a certain timing. And like, for example, if you're coming from the curve onto the straight, there's an opportunity as you're in the curve, there's an opportunity to bang and get an extra little giddy up on that stride that's going to straighten you out. And so if you were to run arcs in both directions,
Which you actually messaged me this week.
Right.
Said, do you ever run the other direction on a curve? I'm like, I'm an idiot. I guess I don't do that.
You never have.
Never. I've never run the wrong direction on a track.
Yeah, I know.
But now I will.
It's like saying
I will.
running backwards is not going to help running forward.
Right.
Now I will, though.
Yeah, well,
you
and-
opened my
well,
mind.
it's something to explore because I think there's some meat on the bone that if you do the right arcs and proportions, it's certainly good for all sports. But I'm talking about just track. If I just want to go faster, the more I can control and utilize my body's rotation, because it's all rotation. The DNA is rotation, right? The actin, myosin filaments, they spiral. There is nothing
Muscle
straight.
spindles are rotation.
Everything is a spiral. Everything's the spiral.
It's a spring.
Everything's, right? Everything. So the straight line is the construct that gets your mass from here to there, and that is straight because that is physically faster, right? But there's nothing straight in your body about that. And by training these arcs, and this is why, we've known each other for what, 6 months, 8 months? Something like that. It's a very short amount of time.
Seems like a long time to me, but
yeah, right. You can come stay with me so you can do. But I think that there is there's things that we can explore, and I think we're going to find some things where arcs and curves will be strategically implemented to enhance the straight ahead. And I think you will be faster straight ahead the better
that's
you
kind of
are
what
at
you're
certain
saying
arcs.
too. That you're
Yes.
doing multi-directional, multiplanar
Right.
stuff in order to improve this.
And forward intent. Okay, forward intent, it is dictated by the foot, ankle, and shin. Okay? Forward intent, if I get the forward intent in the feet to go forward, it gives me all things. If I want to go backward, I have to go forward in the foot to go backward.
Negative foot speed.
Right? Because if I try to go backward and I'm trying to do that, so the forward intent to go backward, it's forward intent first in the feet to go backward. To go sideways is forward intent. It's always forward intent, and the shin angle will the shin angle is going to tell you where the body's
train
going.
backwards though?
What's that?
How many people train backwards?
Yeah, backwards is huge.
But how many? This panel's different, right? I've been going.
Yeah, we're
I've been
different.
going backwards
Yeah,
on
you
the
can say that
treadmill
again.
for fucking.
Yeah.
I don't know, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
We've timed people going backwards, and guess who the fastest people are?
The fastest people.
Forward. There it is.
Because the CNS controls both.
Yes.
Well, you said negative foot speed. I don't know what in the hell that is. I've heard that. So
Oh,
many-
he's saying talking
Well,
about driving it
Push
back.
back to go
Yeah.
forward. I mean, it's physics, right? You're a
Oh,
scientist.
that's
In
easy.
acceleration, you
He's
can.
chemistry.
That's all
Right.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot of fun this year. We're going to have a lot of fun.
A few things. Number one, a clarification. Clarification is that the guy who asked the question about agility is the head of agility at UberZadi. We don't let Beau fuck with the agility. Beau is the treadmill guy.
Clarification. Thanks for clarifying.
I think some things that Beau is saying with respect to the fast feet and coordination are being lost in translation as he talks about agility. Agility, acceleration, deceleration, changing direction. I think we would all agree with that and how we train it. That's why you guys are the experts. I have a question on top-end speed thresholds. You think that is a linchpin, right? Top-end speed,
Yeah. How fast can your car go?
because it also changes speed reserves, right? If I can go 23, I can do a lot at night.
I think people who can go 23 are really efficient at game speeds. And they also do, the faster you are, the less you fatigue at game speeds.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's why offensive tackles, one of the reasons why offensive tackles, the fastest ones get picked first, because they're better in the fourth quarter. They're better in their 14th year. Slow people don't age well. And then the third thing is, the faster you are, the faster your first step. So there's just so many things that happen when you raise the ceiling of your CNS.
So that leads right into the next thing I would say. How much of training the top end speed do you think relates to the CNS and training the brain on what is safe? What are the safety limits? As opposed to the tissues are stronger, the tissues are more resilient, right? We're more springy, we're reflexive. How much of it is telling the brain not to trigger the GTO?
I think you know the answer. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge because the brain, this literally happens to some sprinters. I call it a brain hamstring shutdown, where a guy goes, it hurts when I walk. I can't run. All right, so when do you hurt it? I don't know. I said, well, then you didn't hurt it. And he goes, Coach, I'm not faking. I said, I'm not saying. So anyway, we have to literally tell the guy to stop rubbing it, rolling it, feeling it, icing it, stemming it. We want to forget about our hamstring. And then we use RPR to try to break that down. And as soon as we can interrupt that, the guy is capable of running 4 races the next day. So the brain really is important. Another way that you could say this is that the kid with the old-fashioned thick pop bottle glasses was always the slowest, because the brain would not allow him to sprint, right?
You couldn't see.
Couldn't see well enough. So the brain is a protective mother that does not care about performance. So we need to sprint a couple times a week, 3 max. And when people think that Feed the Cats is just all max speed sprinting, we literally this week sprinted 2 days, and we probably spent 8 seconds at top speed. So the investment is really, really small. And I would argue that if you're doing 10 flies or something, you're not sprinting, because 8 of them are going to be slow, or 6 of them are going to be slow. So we do push on that ceiling of max speed all the time, because it has global effects. Speed's the tide that lifts all boats. Speed is electrical, it's not muscular. But I think as we do that, there's obviously muscular and tendon adaptations that happen, especially with consistency.
That's a key. It's electrical, not
Muscular.
That's a big deal.
I think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Nervous system.
Yeah.
It's just
CNS.
it's just my lens.
Because I've always said, right, everybody's trying to train the muscle to get the movement, right?
Yes.
Train the movement, then the muscle follows, but at the same time, right, the electrical stimulation to the muscle is the key.
And
How do you do that?
And it's not
Top end speed.
It is. And it's not just contraction. This is really important.
Yeah.
It is the frequency of contract, relax.
Yes.
And that frequency of contract, relax is about 10 times faster than my hands are doing it. And there's nothing in the weight room that can train that frequency.
Correct.
And that's not saying the weight room's not important. Strength is good, period. It's good. But strength without training those frequencies will not get you, may get you slower. You may actually get slower because of your hard work in the weight room. Mm-hmm. And I think it'll get you hurt too, because every muscle injury is a contracted muscle that is not ready, that's being elongated, and it's not relaxing and allowing that.
But you have to teach it then.
You have to teach it that.
Back to that stretch. I say,
And-
stretch reflex.
And the
greater the
dose
stretch,
is so
right?
small.
Yeah.
It's so small.
Yeah.
But you have to prioritize it, because if you don't, you'll be training it when you're tired, which doesn't work. You have to find 2 days a week when you're fresh to do that.
Acceleration has to have somewhere to go, right? So if you can increase the top end speed, now you can accelerate into the top end speed. But if you don't have the top end speed, well, what do you accelerate into? Does that make sense? So
And we always accelerate into top end speed. We don't have acceleration days and sprint and speed days. I know Les Bellman does and stuff. But like yesterday, we ran 2 15s into a 10. and two 25s into a 10 out of the blocks. 2 guys at a time, free lap timed. So when people say we're all max speed, every time we get to max speed, we're racing and accelerating.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No. That follows on, I think,
So
exactly.
your point is to hit top speed, you better accelerate.
Well, my point, I guess my point is that the faster my top end is, the more room I have to accelerate to it. But if that's the ceiling, well, the acceleration, it's sort of on a different curve. Where if that's the top, then then the acceleration has somewhere to go. And to do
Usain
something.
Bolt took 60 meters in Berlin
Yep.
to hit 27.6 miles an hour. Took 60 meters. Now,
That's why most people are slowing
he
down.
wasn't like this. He wasn't like this at
No,
50.
no.
I mean,
Yeah.
and he was pretty close to max speed. But it takes longer for somebody, like for me,
Yeah.
my acceleration is maybe 5 yards or 5 meters,
Yeah,
'Cause
gotcha. Right.
My speed's not very high.
Right.
So the faster you are, the further you accelerate?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Say that again?
Yeah, you
Faster
can
are,
continue to
I
accelerate.
think that's the key.
The concept is you're accelerating all the way up to top speed.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, of course.
so
Yes.
Vince Anderson,
Top speed later.
yeah, Vince down at Texas A&M would tell you that you should never not be accelerating, at least conceptually. So, at 30 to 40 meters, we think we're done accelerating, and now we've transitioned into top end speed. But really, I mean, was it FloJo? And again, we're talking about athletes that were either 6'5" freaks or on drugs. So take it in context. But, there was, I believe it was her 100-meter record where she accelerated every 10-meter segment up to almost 90 meters. Wow. Right? So,
Oh, the
and again, I
10.49.
mean, kind of to answer your question, maybe to boil it back down to something like more digestible, is that maximum velocity, as it's higher, we see better acceleration abilities. We see better change of direction abilities. We see better tendon health. We see better, all things athletic are enhanced by improving maximum velocities. So I don't think it's the only thing you should train, but it sure is a pretty good, big
biggest bang for your buck.
big bucket fill
That's it.
to enhance all athletic performance.
Another quick one, Brad. So I haven't seen anything like this, and if you have, let me know. Training speed zones, right? So if you had the ability to deterministically say, this is top speed, right? You're using a timer or some other mechanism, such that this would be 95%, this would be 85%, 75%. If you had the ability, is there programming that exists or that you would think about that would allow you to train in speed zones?
Well, that technology exists. FirePod. Shout out for my FirePod guys. They can track exactly where you're at in a practice and a repetition, so you can see exactly. In fact, FirePod's new coach app actually will tell you. I just saw it today. Eric showed me the how many efforts did you have, or where do I want to be at 85% or at 90%, so that you are training those different zones. So I think the technology actually exists. Now, programming for that will follow the fact that we can actually
That's what I was
see
going to
that
ask.
now.
Like, what would you learn from that?
Well, I mean, again, I'm kind of the simple guy. This will be my whole talk tomorrow night about just simplicity. And I think when you break it down, when you break down speed, you have acceleration, you have top end speed, you have deceleration. That's pretty much it, right? So you're either getting faster, you're at your peak speed, which we know to be about 1.8 to 2 seconds of the most elite sprinters in the world. That's all you have at maximum velocity, or you're decelerating. So the zones, in my opinion, are full force production, accelerating to top end speed. How long can you hold that top end speed through good form? And then the deceleration component, which then comes into speed reserve capacity, type. So I remember my dad, I used to always be like, oh, Carl Lewis, he runs everybody down at the end of the race. He's going faster than everybody else at the end of the race. And my dad's answer was, nope, he's just slowing down less than everybody else.
Right.
Right? Because even he would reach a point of deceleration. So it's really just three pretty easy components of, strength and ability to accelerate, frequency and efficiency to hold maximum velocity, and then the ability or the capacity to reserve speed to decelerate less than everybody else.
And I have proof that, like, if we're doing like 10, 20, and 40-yard flies, which are 3 things we do, the 10's always going to be the highest miles per hour. The 20's going to be slower, and the 40's going to be slower than the 20. There's never an exception to that, because what do you say? You can only hold it for a couple.
1.8, 1.5 to 2.0.
So you could hold your top speed for a 10-yard fly. For a 20-yard fly, it's a little bit too far to hold it all. And for a 40, now, having said that, it's really interesting. The 40-yard fly, the ability to hold your top speed, is actually a better indicator of success in track and field.
Yep.
Because obviously holding your whatever high speed you can hit is really important.
And we said it earlier, you know, whoever said it about football being an acceleration sport is not wrong, right? Most of it, you know,
right.
if you're really good, you got about 6 times a year where you hit maximum velocity on a 40, 50-yard touchdown run. But other than that, you're probably in acceleration. But then, you know, you go back to, well, if their maximum velocity is high, then they probably accelerate better.
So I know at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about how sprinting was something innately that the human species did to hunt down food and all that. But I see a lot of athletes that come in and they look mind blown when I tell them that sprinting is a skill. Do you believe sprinting is a skill, and why? And how can we
100%.
educate the meathead weightlifting coaches out there to get them on board of why it is a skill?
100% it's a skill.
100%.
It's absolutely can be taught. I mean, I think every human has a different ceiling, right? Genetics.
In everything.
In
everything.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely a skill that you can learn. And I think I am of the belief that speed is hard to teach. And so therefore, the meathead that you're talking about just didn't want to take the time to learn how to coach speed. And they took the low-hanging fruit of, hey, if I make you stronger, you're going to get faster. That's my quick, easy answer.
Yeah, and I think too that I say the meatheads in weight rooms, and I say that affectionately, you know, that they, when they lifted, they saw fast adaptations. And don't you agree? Yep. You know, like you can be pretty proud of being stronger within a couple weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
Where I say that speed grows like a tree. Like you better measure it perfectly often, or you won't know that it's even growing. And so because of that, maybe they got frustrated working on speed, but I think the bigger part of it is that they probably attacked speed training like they did everything else in their life. They worked their ass off, like 2 hours of which makes you slower, you know? And they probably said, screw it, you know, like this is all genetic, you know? And so they did it like that. But I don't want to tip off my presentation, but I'm really proud of my grandkids sprinting and how almost perfect they are at the age of 3, 4, 5.
Because they haven't been, they haven't been.
Coached.
It goes back to that question.
They haven't been detrained
What did
yet.
I say early on, right? What are we primal? What are we meant to do? We're meant to sprint. We are designed to sprint from the foot up.
But
Look
as,
at the
as
human-
you know, when you see high school kids, they may run, you know, like a puppet. You know, like they don't even opposite
know.
arm.
Yeah.
They-
Well, and I'll give you a good example of it. So one of the things that I used to do is a 40-yard dash. I would help you with your start. And so you don't have to be faster, but you ran a tenth of a second faster because it's skill. And I took a kid who was a speed demon, ran a 4.4, taught him a start, and he ran a 4.2. That's a hand time. And he had a father and an uncle who were on that 4x1 team years back. This kid was, you know, from that kind of genetic
Pretty good
tree.
genes.
And so, and that just speaks to, this is a skill because you're not faster than you were 5 minutes ago. You're more skillful, and therefore you're faster. So, and that's just a very acute, like laser beam. We're going to work on the start, right? It's the most important phase of a 40 is your start. And skillfully, you can game the start for a lot of people because they, how do you do it? How many times have you practiced it? You saw another guy do it. What's your strategy? So when you can start applying the skillful tact to that and clock a faster time, you're faster, but you're not faster. And it was 100% skill related.
And to point out the speed grows like a tree, Marcellus Moore, who ran for me, set the 14-year-old world record his freshman year when he ran for me. He ran a 10:40 at the age of 14, 10:31 the next year. Last year at the age of 21, he was 15th in the trials, running a 10:05. So it took him 9 years to go from 10:40 to 10:05. Now, if you're not measuring accurately, you may not know you're even improving. And you better play the long game if you're a sprinter, because you're not going to improve 1 second a year.
What's the quote from Usain Bolt? I trained in 9 years to run 9 seconds.
Yeah, you better play the long game, which means you just stay focused and you train fresh and you celebrate victories and fight through plateaus, and it's hard.
Well, and then working with people who aren't sprinters. There's a guy,
Yes.
Mark Bell, who's become a very good friend of mine. He's a big fitness influencer. He's done, very heavy lifting, and he's very influential. I've taught, when I met him, I was smiling ear to ear. I'm like, look, you're a big dog. I'm going to help you be a big cat. And big cats are sexier than big dogs. So, and you're relatable to people, right? So I was up with him about 3 weeks ago, and I gave him a cue for what to do with the lower back. Bang, snap your fingers. He's like, oh shit, I feel that. And then we taped it, and it's the best he's ever run. It's the best he's ever run because of one little cue. So that's skill.
So, one of the points of this whole conversation, this entire conference, is to get exposed to different ideas. And so all of you guys up here have all been doing things at a very high level for a very long time while also doing things differently. So for you guys in particular, how do you go about continuing to learn or take in new ideas without messing up something that you're already doing well? How do you actually integrate that and do what you do better instead of taking in other things that mess up what you do and making it worse?
I can say something. Meeting Tony, okay, I was very intrigued by everything made sense. And just lost my train of thought again. Flying on airplanes.
I'll save you, Dave.
Yeah, save me.
Save.
Save me.
I think it's a great question because if you are of a growth mindset, you're always researching, you're always looking, you're always asking, and as you scale yourself as a coach, you'll have more people come into your life that have opinions, that have things they want to speak into, and what you have to do is I think for me, establishing your non-negotiables, right? Here's the things that over the years I have found to be effective. I know they're going to work. Now, I get this new nugget over here. Where does that fit into my programming? And so, and then over time, just like Tony said, as you go down the path, did that impede what I was doing before? Did it enhance what I was doing before? And don't be afraid at any moment to be like, man, a couple years ago I was really into X. And now I just kind of fell off because I didn't feel like it was doing, and you can't be afraid to kind of let some things go would be my advice.
My brain came back. So when I met Tony and then I started watching his athletes and the practices and stuff that he puts online, I saw nothing wrong. Okay, all I saw was right. So if I were to come in and sort of advise, I'd be like, okay, great. Every kid in here is head over foot. They're all, running with balance, right? There's no stiffs in his system. And again, it's arriving at, it's more natural to move with balance than it is to move without balance.
I was going to say, that's not really coached.
That's what I'm saying.
It's not really coached. We just do it, and they've organically.
But you've set up a construct
Yes.
in which the body fulfills its destiny because it's where we come from and it's what we're capable of doing now.
What it wants to do.
Exactly right.
What it needs to do, which is what it wants to do, which is get there faster, right? And so, in terms of, there's gradations, right? So you can, as long as you're not doing anything wrong, now you can concentrate and go in more microscopic and start to really work on the factors that now we're a toothbrush, doing the tires and the white walls, and we're getting that thing perfect, whereas the first job is spray the dirt off the whole vehicle. Does that make sense? And then you get into the detailing, and as long as you're not doing anything wrong, there's nothing to correct, there's only things to refine. And so that's what I see in his work, is I see a bunch of athletes doing a whole bunch of correct things. Okay, great. Well, let's leverage on that information and understanding, and let's see if these stimuli can make that kid even faster.
And there's always, I love what Brian said about, you have your parameters, non-negotiables. Like, my dosages are non-negotiable. I mean, we are not going to double dosage 3 years from now. No. I mean, and we can't go less because we're, minimal at best. I tell my team that every track team in America is going to work more than we do. And they look at me like, is that smart? Like, coach, it isn't like hard work. I said, no, we're going to do things better. So an example, I took that kid with a hamstring strain to Corpus 2 nights ago, and he said, this guy's going to be a superstar. And I go, I know. He's like 15, he's 6'5", and he's already running close to 23 miles an hour, and he's going to be amazing. So Chris says, to keep an elite guy healthy like that, and he just strapped a couple bands, and basically you put your foot in between the 2 bands and kick back and forth. And of course, I say why, and he goes, because it will teach the muscles to contract and relax faster than anything you can do on the track. He said, you can put the band down low, and then instead of the knee doing this, now the hip's doing that. And he says, we're teaching the muscles to contract and relax fast. I have seen Cal Dietz oscillating, blah, 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 for 5, 6, 7 years, but that finally, let's just say I bought bands the next morning. I bought bands the next morning, and I said, do we need to do this with all the guys? He goes, no, just the guys that are really fast. And so we can add things like that when they make sense and fit into what we do.
You've heard me say it at our place. We know like if I'm programming for an elite athlete, then that might be dead center for how we're going to write our programming. But then we put guardrails around it. And so the deal is keep it within the guardrails. If something that, doesn't quite make sense, that might be an outlier over here of the guardrails, then you don't put it in. Because you kind of know about where your guardrails lie. Like for Tony, he's not going to ever raise volume, that much. For us, like competitive or, repetitive burpees, for example, it's just an exercise that I don't love. But, a bunch of burpees or 10-mile runs or whatever are not going to fit within our guardrails.
Yeah, so one thing you guys talked about earlier, just can we get a little more into overspeed training? We talked about the treadmills and they're uphill. I've seen that they, can go downhill as well. So where do you put in that downhill gravity assisted overspeed training? Starting at the middle of a hill, maybe a 12-year-old kid maybe not starting at the top of a 40-yard hill with a 60-degree incline, right? He's gonna fall on his face. But where do you put in that overspeed training, and how do you go in and out of that compared to an overspeed training in an uphill, right? I think, Beau, you mentioned it, running uphill, you're gonna do it perfectly, right? No one runs uphill wrong, but we saw Daniel Jones, right, fall flat on his face because they said he literally was going too fast.
My first question to that is, what is overspeed? And I think what you're talking about is when you can reach or push somebody to max speed, right, without quote unquote overspeed. Does that make sense? I mean, max speed to me is overspeed. So when you're pushing somebody to the highest point they can get to, that's overspeed, right? What I think when overspeed becomes bad in my world on that tread is what gives the tread, I think, the bad rep is pushing somebody beyond a point that they're not capable of reaching. Right? You have to teach people to. It goes back to the muscle thing. Is you can't train the muscle right to get the right movement. You have to train the right movement to get the muscle to activate fast. And it goes back to teaching the muscle to relax and then contract, which is reciprocal inhibition.
Yeah.
Right? And firing that muscle in the proper sequence. You can quote unquote overspeed, right? I can get somebody on the treadmill and I can say, okay, I want you to run 20 miles an hour. Hold the bar, right? I'm gonna crank that thing up to 23 miles an hour. I'm gonna push you to an overspeed situation, and eventually, based on a said principle, you'll eventually hit 23 miles per hour. But it goes back, if you're not capable of running 23 miles an hour because your movement is not capable of doing it, because you haven't taught the muscle to get to that point yet, it's a periodization phase, and you have to get to that point, then it becomes overspeed, right? But does that make sense? Am I,
No. Don't disagree.
I'd answer that question a lot different today than I would 25 years ago. I think the return on investment of overspeed training is too risky for athletes, frankly. I don't do it anymore. There's new systems, the 1080, things like that you can get access to where it's a little safer. But to the point of, when you're periodizing an athlete and you're all the way through complete development of all the other phases of running, what extra are you going to get out of that? And is the risk worth the potential injury that could present itself when you start to tow somebody? And again, if you have a perfectly safe environment and a really high-end quality athlete, but I just saw too many injuries early on in my career thinking that was the path. 2 weeks before the state track meet, we're going to hit some overspeed. Sure enough, have a kid rip a hamstring,
It goes back to the mistake thing, right? Is I used to do quote unquote overspeed. And the way I learned overspeed and I saw overspeed was in getting a harness system, off-weight them, and get them on a high-speed treadmill. I always call it high performance now, right? And make that athlete in an off-weighted position run as fast as they possibly can. What happened, right? This was towards the end of the periodization, and I thought I was doing it right. Hamstring. And I'm talking not just like that hurts. I'm like, kid got shot from the backside, right? Yeah. The principle is, right, for somebody to go above and beyond their perceived exertion, right? That is overspeed. But if you push it too much in the wrong way, then it's going to result to,
having grown up in a weight room, I always kind of tried to draw some different parallels to different types of training. And it's like, okay, we all squat, right? At some point, all of us have done some squats. So at what point would I get like, all right, I hit my one rep max PR, but now I'm going to throw 50 extra pounds on it and go try to hit 2 reps, right? It kind of doesn't make sense. And so why in speed do we think that that's an okay environment to be like, all right, I've reached the threshold, I've improved speed, but now I'm going to tack on a little extra. I just think you're setting up. And again, I'm the dumbest guy at the table, so I don't even know if I understand the physiology of does that really work? Because I know a lot of high-end, professional-level sprint coaches that don't do any overspeed. So I think it's just a little bit of one of those tools that maybe it surfaces sometimes. And, I know Christian Coleman and some of those guys, and they don't do overspeed training.
Overspeed to me now is running uphill. 3% is uphill. 2% is uphill. 1% is uphill.
I can give you 2 bad examples, 2 good ones. 27 years ago was the last time I used bungee cords when my anchor guy got hurt. Okay? Because bungee cords pull you like crazy until they don't, and so live and learn, stupid mistake. We never run downhill ever because of mechanics. Everything you talk about that's good about uphill is bad downhill.
So when you say overspeed and running downhill, right? When you start running downhill, I was taught this a long time ago. Anything greater than a 5% decrease, okay? And go find somewhere outside that is a perfect 5% down. I mean, good luck finding that.
Your mechanics suck.
Your mechanic, and you go immediately into a braking force, right? Have you ever ran downhill? Go down a steep hill and start running downhill. And what the fuck happens? right?
Steep would be a big problem.
Huh?
Yeah.
I would love to have the
I don't mean to cut you
wherewithal.
off, Tony.
No, you're good.
I'd love to have the wherewithal to have a 100-meter track, and I can press a button and I can change the grade. And I would, this is experimentation. Like, would a half a degree
It will.
forward?
It will.
I
Could
would
that
be
be
okay.
beneficial though?
Could
No.
be.
So the
Say
best,
what-
the best example I've seen that again, I mean, this is almost ridiculous, but if you've seen Marcel Jacobs run behind the horse trailer,
I love
Oh, that's
that.
amazing. There's
So
no
that's-
wind.
Yeah, I love that.
There's no wind.
that then decreases some resistance from the wind and
It's a
stuff.
huge differential.
I like that over speed because it's safe.
but it's safe.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're
And
going to
then
stay within
the
your
other safe thing. It's so stupid, but run with the wind.
Yeah, running.
Like
There you go.
Like somebody asked me if I could have any invention. I said, well, it'd be a wind tunnel.
Justin Gatlin ran a
And there'd
9.4.
be music and stuff, and
Yeah.
and we would get this natural. I don't like being pulled by the waist.
Yeah,
You
oh,
know?
no, right.
And I don't
right.
like downhill, and I don't like, like too much over speed.
a fan.
The 1080 you can really set at
1080 's
really low levels. That's probably safe, but it sounds stupid. But anytime there's a windy day, and it's windy in Chicago a lot, you need to say like, all right, it's an overspeed day.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't let those metrics go. We have like windy metrics so that we're not breaking records. But they will, and I'm not so sure that's bad. For sure, we would never run against the wind or ever wear a parachute. But I've done that before. It was 30 years ago, the last day I had somebody wear a parachute.
They still do it.
They still do it.
Okay. Bungee cord still exists, right?
Oh.
Parachute still exists. But you understand when he's saying the bungee, right? Sprinting is a mechanical, right? Biomechanical efficiency, right? As soon as you pull somebody from the pelvis, they automatically go out from underneath them. The pelvis changes. Running downhill will change the pelvis. Running uphill, my experience, right? It puts you in a perfect position, a better position than running downhill. Let's just say that.
I'd like to play with grades because I remember when I was in high school, I clocked a 4.6. It's the fastest I ever clocked was 4.6 in a 40.
fast, David.
And there was a particular, we would go up to a park and there was a street, blacktop. And there, this manhole to that tree or whatever was 40 yards. And as I reflect.
That might have been 37 yards, David.
I'm
may-
thinking I know the manhole he's talking about. It's 37. But go ahead, go ahead.
But as I reflect back on that time, I'm curious what the actual grade of that particular thing is that we're doing, and if it's downhill just slightly where you're not upsetting the mechanics,
That's
but
fine.
you're getting more force because you're going down a hill. And then the braking force in and of itself is very interesting because it's always interpreted as bad that there is a braking force. But I think that the braking force actually accelerates the center of mass forward and down, and then your body wedges it up. So in the air, you are slowing down, okay? Otherwise, you could long jump forever, okay? So when you hit the ground and you're on the ground for less than 1/10 of a second, that is your only opportunity to accelerate or maintain or go fast.
You can't go faster when you're in the air.
Correct.
You can only go
Correct.
slower in
And
the air.
if you just picture that you're walking along and suddenly your foot hits a curb. I mean, if I trip, boom, my center of mass accelerates rapidly forward and down. And that's what I want, so that the land load launch captures that impetus of center of mass accelerating down at contact and coming up from the launch. So the braking force, if I can make the braking force more extreme, because I've done a lot of backward work where my quads are capable of just jamming that sucker, then maybe I go faster. Does that make sense? That make sense?
Not to me yet, but
So what I'm saying
but
is that
I mean,
Give us 24 hours
I'm
on that one.
open-minded, though.
the foot stopping, okay, which it has to do on the ground. What I'm saying is that can contribute to acceleration, the braking force of
It
the
kind
foot.
of reminds me of the cut step, and
Kinda.
when you abbreviate that final step before the high hurdles,
Yeah.
by 2 inches, it allows the hips
Yeah,
to
yeah.
rapidly come forward in an aggressive position. But
Because-
I'm not sure
well,
we're
if
ever
it's-
really
if
cut
it's-
stepping when we're sprinting.
But if the braking force on the foot were slowing you down, let's work that out. You're slowing down in the air, and now you have less than a tenth of a second opportunity, and so some phase of that less than a tenth of a second is still slowing you down? Bullshit.
And the good news is you don't have to know any of this shit. Time sprints. I'm serious.
Yeah.
I mean,
no,
like,
no,
like
no,
we
right,
like
right.
to talk
no,
about
no,
this
and
stuff.
listen, you're 100% right about that, but it still is so much fun to try and drill into deeper understanding so I can exploit it more.
Yeah, we all want to know more.
Sure, absolutely.
You know what I mean? It not too much information, just essential information. But I think what Tony's and your point that you didn't coach your kids to go head over foot. You just set up a scenario where they're competitive, they're having fun, the human body moves this
Yeah, wait
way.
till you see my grandkids.
And then
they've
do
never been
this.
coached, but they've sprinted a lot.
Because that's
Well, and also,
they do.
it's every
don't change it.
the mirror neuron and your exposure to some, stimulus or feedback. That's how you learn. We speak English and nobody studied it.
Right.
It was osmotic, right? You just absorbed it. We
copied it.
You copied it, and you got positive and negative feedback. You said "mama," and everybody jumped up and down. Okay, well that's a word I'm gonna keep in the bank. Mama, dada. Oh, these big people jump up and down. So it's the positive reinforcement of certain behaviors that is what makes them. There was a girl who was in England, and she was raised, her parents were drunks, and they put her out in the backyard with the dogs. So from the age of like 1 or 2 to 7 or 8, this child was a dog. The child walked on all fours, ate with its mouth, smelled your butt. It was a dog, okay? Because that's what
Let's
it
get
was
back to
exposed
overspeed training.
No, but I'm just saying.
We got another question.
Yeah, sorry.
We'll explore
My
that.
point is that exposure.
Give me some bourbon, and then we'll talk about that.
If you're a 3-year-old, right, and all you know is when you go visit granddad is he's with all these guys and they're all running, you're now being exposed to that, and it's an osmotic adoption. Whereas if
That's part of it.
If
but
you
I think
were-
they're born with it too.
they're born with it.
well, they're
I
born.
think
Yes,
wake up,
they're,
eat your bowl
they're
of
born
genetics.
with it too.
I think
but
so.
the neural engrams can only form from what you are exposed to that you experiment with. And if you were never exposed to upright bipedal locomotion, you're not going to be good at upright bipedal locomotion. If you never practice speaking English, human, well, and you just grunt and bark and stuff, that is because that's what you were exposed to. And so kids in a good environment, you don't need to teach them. I want to see personal training just go away. And now you pay someone to learn how to dance or learn how to do jujitsu or learn how to do something, but I'm going to pay you to count my push-ups? Really? Like, what are we doing?
David's putting us all out of a job.
No, I'm saying you get a better job.
Gotta bring that dog out somehow. I wanted to get some book recommendations from you all, whether it's certain sports, training,
I got one.
biomechanics.
Awareness Through Movement, Moshe Feldenkrais.
I got that one.
That is, you have that one under your belt, you'll understand the sensitivity and gradations of force and subtlety, because that's where the greatness comes from.
A lot of what I'm reading.
Awareness Through Movement, Feldenkrais.
Underground Secrets to Running Faster, Barry Ross.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Chris Corfus has great foot stuff. He's Chris Corfus with a K.
KOR, yeah.
He's the best foot guy I know. He'll look at people's shoes,
Yeah.
and he'll always say, "What in the hell are you doing wearing these shoes?"
Tread don't lie.
Tread and like the insole getting kids buy shoes for reasons other than performance.
Sports
Looks.
gene. Sports gene. I think
That's a great book.
that kind of dives into why our another one is Born to Run, I think.
I'll
Born
make
to
Google.
Run. That's another good one. Do you have that one? Have you Born to Run? It's about an Indian tribe in the Copper Canyons of Mexico.
The Tatahumara.
I mean, they can run extremely long distances. I mean, it's kind of
50
it's what we're
miles.
doing. But they run on their bare feet. Yeah, man, crazy stuff. So that's a good
Yeah,
one. Sports
Tata
gene
Humara.
dives into it goes back to I say wake up, eat your bowl of genetics. Why are the why are the Kenyans so good at running the way they run, right? Why are sprinters good at the way they're running, right? So it's a deep dive into. So.
Chop wood, carry water.
Ooh, what's that one?
It's not a sport book, but if you apply some of the concepts to training, next level.
Yeah, it's one of the best coaching books ever written.
Yep.
But it wasn't meant to be a coaching
Exactly,
book.
exactly. And then Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers is also pretty good.
And then my good friend Steve Jones, who wrote
That's right.
Twin Thieves, best book on leadership ever written.
Oh, wow.
And yeah,
I got some
He's
books
on the
there.
sideline with the Packers now.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's doing all right.
Great dude.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We're all readers.
Have you ever read Anatomy Trains?
Yes.
Yes, that's bro. That's.
I want to hear your opinions on that.
You want my opinion
Yeah.
on it? You better be ready to not do anything but read that book. I mean, hey, it's you talk about a fucking deep dive into anatomy, and you get into the fascial trains and the fascial lines, the anatomy lines. I mean,
Yeah.
did you read it?
I'm friends with Tom Myers now.
It's
Tom
like
Myers,
reading Grey's Anatomy.
What
You
did
know,
it,
I'm not saying it's. I mean, it's something you really have got to put your time into reading and understanding, and it's you better have a good understanding of anatomy to begin with before you. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to like somebody who's not taken an anatomy course or is had some kind of background, because the anatomy trains is it's a deep dive, but.
Yeah,
It's a good book. It's a great book.
It's an excellent book. Tom Myers, he comes from Ida Rolf. So Feldenkrais and Rolf were somatic pioneers way back. Feldenkrais was functional integration, primarily focused on the nervous system. And Ida Rolf was the structural integration, primarily concerned with the fascia. So her job was to move the fascia to put the bones in place. And Feldenkrais was reduce the effort so you can discern the subtlest gradations and let your body find that path that is more efficient. But if you're grinding your teeth and putting in effort, you don't have the sensitivity to do less and do more with the subtlety. And Myers comes from Rolf, and he is a skilled body worker. And what he's done is he's put together the anatomy trains where he's done more dissections than anyone. I did a fresh frozen dissection with him where you go and there's, literally thawing out
Sure he
8
is.
bodies, okay? And you're cutting into a body and you're like, hey, wait a minute, I thought you're supposed to have only these many vertebrae. Well, this guy's got an extra one. You're like, anatomy is just a mean average. And one of the best anatomy books was, Netter, Netter. He was the best hand-drawn anatomy before he had all the apps and stuff. And Myers, like going into a fresh frozen dissection where literally you're working on tissue that still has hydration in it. I mean, you're going inside the human body. And the anatomy is just a mean average. Okay, well, you have 12 ribs. Okay, well, some guy's got 13, right? Some guy has 11.
I think from leading edge right now goes back to Core Fist. I think is awesome, and Cal Dietz and what Cal Dietz has been doing for a long time and has studied everything is something that you really need to dive into.
They're very innovative.
Yeah,
I mean, like
without a doubt.
If I could criticize both of them, and I'd say to their face that they almost evolved too fast for me. It's like, weren't you a good coach like 5 years ago? You don't do any of that stuff anymore.
Yeah, Cal Dietz will say, what I did, triphasic is already outdated.
Yeah, you say, oh,
And
that's
it's
a
just
bunch of
kind of
shit.
like, it's just like coming of age right now. Like, oh man, that's fucking amazing shit, right? Spring ankle, that's amazing. Dietz is like, oh, that's old shit.
Yeah, they're
That's
so
not far ahead.
innovative.
Yep.
And I am much more old school in that way. That I changed gradually. Yeah.
Running Faster by Brian Kula, that's a great book.
In production. In production.
Production.
All right, this is going to be a double question, Ben. You're getting included in this. Number one is probably the most important question. You have to tell us your favorite superhero first. Second question, you can time travel back, talk to yourself when you're starting your career. There's a lot of young coaches, athletes. A lot of athletes will be watching this, a lot of young coaches.
one sentence you can tell yourself, what would that be? One sentence.
Wow. Bam.
Superhero first, don't forget.
Yeah, that's the most important. Superhero.
Superhero.
Batman, because I still think I could be Batman right now. and I would tell myself, lead from the front.
Lead from the front. I like that. I would probably have to say Batman too, because he's sort of a gadget guy. I think I'd rather be Spider-Man, but I'm not. Superman would be cool. So I have to say Batman because, you know, ingenuity and technology to be badass. So I would relate to that. Tell myself, boy, oh boy. I think I might go with Charlie Francis's phrase, wait for it. Wait for it. He said that was the best cue he ever received. He said it was the best cue he ever gave. And now, ruminate on that.
For me, this will be a very unsatisfying answer, is I have no favorite superheroes. I was the type of kid that didn't read comic books. I was real serious and shit. I was wearing a watch when I was 4. So, yeah, you can just imagine the type of nerd I was. But no, I just, yeah, that doesn't stir my blood. But if I could go back, and this is not a flippant answer, I would tell myself to feed the cats.
Nice.
Which would mean that I am not going to push kids. I'm going to make them love it so much they feel pulled. And we reflect each other. You know, like, you know, I got to talk to a group of teachers for the first time, and basically I was teaching them how to feed the cats in the classroom. And I said, if you have a bunch of miserable kids in your class, you will reflect them. So you better start trying to make school, or at least your class, the best part of their day. Or else you will never be the teacher you want to be. And to get them like that, you better come in and tell them, this is going to be the best class of your day. And I'm going to be your favorite teacher. And I used to do that on day 1. And that's, you have to, on day 2, you have to start fulfilling that. And when that happens, I call it the endless feedback loop that makes you excited, them excited, and that's the way, and that's not the way I learned to coach. I didn't start feeding the cats till I was 40. I was a hard-nosed, authoritarian. I pushed kids. I tried to make boys into men. Losing was unacceptable. You know, I mean, all that crap. You know, that my practices aren't meant for your enjoyment. You know, all that kind of crap. And I wish I could have just gone back with what I know now about how to make my life. I'm younger as a coach now. I turned 66 in 4 days. I'm younger as a coach now than I was when I was 35 because my kids love it. And we reflect that.
It's awesome.
It's a hard answer to beat right there, bro.
Yeah.
And it just goes back to that was mistakes.
Yep.
Superhero.
Superhero, Wolverine.
Hey,
Right. Batman's a pretty good dude. Wolverine just because he's just Wolverine, right? That's kind of how I, goes back to, used to think that, just fucking my staff teases me now that I'm in a transitional phase of my life where it's like, 20 years ago I would say to a kid now, like 20 years ago, I would make you do A, B, and C, and D. But at the end of the day, back to your question, Wolverine, speak, listen, and pray to God. Way earlier than I have done. That's my answer right there. Is if I would have just listened to him, talked to him more, and prayed harder, I think I would have been in a lot different position and a lot of things in my life moving forward. Amen.
How the hell do I follow that? It's a great answer. Deadpool, for sure.
That hit me
For sure.
That did not do
Best.
I was not thinking that, dude.
Not a big superhero guy. That guy makes me laugh. He's the best, Ryan Reynolds. I'd go back, I'd say, and I'd have more community, more reach out, more influences in my life, and get out of the ego and the I'm right and the, which I think we all learn as we mature and get, some wisdom in our life of I don't know everything, but it probably took me, I really saw a spike in my career, my abilities, my success when I held it like this versus holding it like this. So.
Great question, Mike.
Yeah.
Job, Davini.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the very first podcast. It's been a great one. A round of applause for our presenters.
Thank you.